Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday, October 10th, 2024 special meeting of the Boulder City Council. Just an announcement before we get started. This meeting will be conducted in English with simultaneous interpretation into Spanish. To access interpretation equipment, please see city staff, who are currently raising their hand. See? Raising their hand. We have speakers sign up to speak in Spanish, and their remarks will be interpreted consecutively into English. So thanks so much to our interpreter or interpreters this evening. And a note for all speakers and presenters, for the benefit of those listening to the interpretation, please speak slowly. Clearly pronounce your words, take a breath between sentences, and allow space between speakers. Thank you. And I will now go ahead and call us to order and ask for a roll call, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. We'll start tonight's roll call, as usual, with Councilmember Adams.
Yes. Present.
Benjamin.
Present.
Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Present.
Marquis.
Present.
Shuhart.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Present.
Councilmember Wallach.
Here.
And Weiner.
Present.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Excellent. Thanks so much. If we can do our consent agenda, please.
Yes, tonight's consent agenda is item 2 on the agenda, and it consists of items 2A and 2B.
Any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Or perhaps a motion?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Can we do a roll call, please, Alicia?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The roll call for consent agenda items 2A and 2B will begin with Councilmember Marquis.
Yes.
Shuhart.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes.
Councilmember Wallach.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
And Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Consent agenda items 2A and 2B are hereby approved unanimously.
Thank you very much. And if now we can go to our first public hearing, please. And we do have 2 of them tonight.
Yes, sir. Our public hearings are item number 3 on tonight's agenda. 3A is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance 8652, designating the property at 3300 Penrose Place, City of Boulder, Colorado, to be known as the Geological Society of America as an individual landmark under Chapter 9-11, Historic Preservation, Boulder Revised Code 1981, and setting forth related details.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and you'll hear me say this throughout the night, but a reminder for everyone to slow down and give us a little grace for our community members as we have the meeting in 2 languages for the benefit of all our community members. So with that, I will send this over to Marcy.
All right, good evening, council members. I am Marcy Gerwing, Principal Planner in Planning and Development Services, and I affirm to tell the truth in this presentation this evening. This hearing will begin with an overview of the procedure for quasi-judicial hearings. I'll pause here for council members to note any ex parte contacts you might have about the property at 3300 Penrose Place, any site visits or conversations you've had outside of public hearings. See none. We'll next move to the staff presentation, followed by the applicant's presentation. Council may ask questions after either one of those. The public hearing is then open for community member comments, and council may ask questions. After the last person speaks, the applicant will have a chance to respond to anything that was said. The public hearing is then closed and council will discuss the decision. The motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 5 members to pass. Motions must state findings, conclusions, and a recommendation. And finally, a record of the hearing is kept by staff. As part of the quasi-judicial process, the criteria for your decision is found in 911.6 of the Boulder Revised Code, and that is focused on whether the designation meets the purposes and standards in 911.1 and 911.2 of the Boulder Revised Code in balance with the goals and policies of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. Looking at those two code sections, the first defines the purpose of the preservation code, which is to preserve, protect, and enhance historically significant buildings and areas of the city reminiscent of past eras, events, or people, and to develop and maintain appropriate settings to enhance property values, stabilize neighborhoods, promote tourist trade and interests, and foster knowledge of the city's living heritage. The second provides the type of designations council may pass, and this application in front of you tonight is for an individual landmark. And the third part of the criteria asks whether the designation is in balance with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, which sets the future for development and preservation of the city of Boulder and Boulder County. The options in front of you tonight are to approve the designation, modify and approve, or deny the designation. If designated, this property will become Boulder's 218th individual landmark. Any exterior changes will be reviewed through a landmark alteration certificate, and the owners will receive a bronze plaque and be eligible for historic preservation tax credits. This application started back in May of 2024 when the owner applied to designate the building and a portion of the property as an individual landmark. This was a recommendation from staff to the planning board as a condition of their site review approval. On August 7th, the Landmarks Board unanimously recommended the designation to the City Council, and that brings us to this evening's public hearing, having been on the first reading consent agenda on September 19th. The property is located in Northeast Boulder, just south of the diagonal along Iris Avenue between 30th and 34th on Penrose Place. The building was constructed for the Geological Society of America and is a office building that will be adaptively reused into affordable housing and integrated into its landscape setting. The use of the waffle-like concrete setting and exposed aggregate continues from the outside to the inside and demonstrates one of the ways that the architect brought the outdoors in and the indoors out. There are geological installations on the grounds, including a sundial carved in a polished slab of serpentine, a garnet rock monolith, and a memorial to Charles Lee McGinnis, and a rock anthracite door poles and granitized hornfells on the right. The building, going now to the significance criteria, which looks at the historic, architectural, and environmental significance. The building is historically significant for its association with the Geological Society of America for the past 52 years. It was purpose designed for their national headquarters. The Geological Society of America was formed in 1888 and moved from New York to Boulder in 1967. The relocation to Boulder was part of the trend of federal and private institutions coming to Boulder after World War II. This trend included the construction of the National Bureau of Standards Central Radio Propagation Laboratory, now known as NIST, in 1954 and the establishment of UCAR in 1959. The National Center for Atmospheric Research was designed by modernist architect I.M. Pei in 1961 and constructed in 1967 in a similar brutalist style. The building is also architecturally significant and was designed by Art Everett from the firm Everett & Ziegel. He was a co-founding member of Everett Ziegel Architects in 1964, along with his business partner Alan Ziegel. He is considered one of Boulder's leaders of local modernism, and other works in Boulder, along with Ziegel, include the Pearl Street Mall, which has won national design awards. The building is designed in the brutalist style, which you can see in the horizontal, broadly cantilevered concrete planes, each one larger than the one below, supported by projecting vertical arch slabs, which are visually connected only by mullions in glass. In 1978, the Daily Camera wrote that this is one of Boulder's most attractive and interesting buildings and offers visitors the uncommon experience of enjoying natural history as an art form. The scale and mass of the building are compatible with the park-like setting with the integrated geological exhibits. The site was chosen for its view and to add to the beauty of the approach to Boulder along the Longmont Diagonal. The property has retained that setting, which adds to the building's environmental significance. These Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan policies are relevant to this application, which include protecting sites with cultural or architectural value, encouraging new designations, and working to support historic amenities so they continue to contribute to the economic vitality of the community and foster meaningful connections to Boulder. The proposed boundary includes just a portion of the site going around the existing building and encapsulating the landscape area along Penrose, but excluding the contemporary development on the site. A landmark alteration certificate was approved earlier this year for the removal of the 1993 addition to restore the building back to its original form, as well as the installation of solar panels and the replacement of the windows. With that, the Landmarks Board and staff recommend that Council adopt Ordinance 8652, designating the building and a portion of a property at 3300 Penrose to be known as the Geological Society of America. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks so much for that, Marcy. Really appreciate the presentation. Any questions from council? Seeing none, is the applicant going to make a presentation or a statement?
Yes, I would like to welcome Ian Swallow with Boulder Housing Partners.
All right, Ian,
And I'll
come on
pull
up.
up your slides.
Good evening, Council. Ian Swallow with Boulder Housing Partners. Pleased to be here for this landmark application. I'll try to keep comments brief. I think Marcy did a great job covering it, but just wanted to give you a little context for the community and the project. So,
Ian, if you can get a little further into the microphone, please.
yes, I can do that. So I know everyone is familiar with Boulder Housing Partners, but I do like to just begin a little bit with about who we are. So we are the affordable housing provider for the city of Boulder. We have about 1,600 units in the city, and this landmarking is going to allow us to not only preserve this building, but also develop an additional 113 permanently affordable units on the site in conjunction with the units that will be in the adaptively reused historic structure. Next slide. Super quick overview of the site. So it's right at basically what would be 33rd and the Diagonal Highway, just south of the Diagonal. What I really enjoy about the property is you're right on the highway, but you really don't hear the traffic noise. There's a ton of mature vegetation that will be included within that landmark boundary that we intend to keep as it really adds a lot to the site. Next slide. Just a little bit on the process the site has been through. So we received unanimous approval from Planning Board on our site review application, which included this building as well as the new housing that will be built at the site. And then, as Marcy mentioned, our alteration certificate was approved in June, and we had unanimous approval from the LRDC in August. This site plan just highlights a little bit of how the existing building fits into the overall development of the site. So really, when you arrive at the site, the historic building will be sort of the focal point. It'll have community space, leasing office, as well as residential units. And then you'll see 4 additional residential units on the site that will not be included within that boundary. We can skip this slide. I think you covered this, Marcy. And then you can just kind of flip through these. These are just photos of the building. Marcy had some, but it really is a remarkable setting and a really unique and beautiful building. So to finish, this is just a rendering of the what we envision the final community to be, with the historic building on the right and the new housing in the background there. So it's a project we're really excited about, adaptive reuse of a commercial site into housing. I think it's a really good example and a project we're really proud of. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Ian. Any questions for the applicant? Not seeing any. Thanks for being here. All right, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. We've got 3 speakers signed up. We'll start by going through our public participation guidelines. If you could please, Alicia.
Thank you, sir. And again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. I will now share with you our public participation at City Council meetings guidelines. As they're being pulled up, I'll go ahead and start. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and council, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. For more information about this vision and the community engagement processes, we ask that you please visit our website at bouldercolorado.gov/services/productive-atmospheres. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during this meeting. Participants are asked to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. Only one person at a time at the podium, unless an accommodation like an interpreter is required. All remarks and testimonies shall be limited to matters related to city business. No standing in or otherwise blocking the aisles. No participant shall stand or hold items such as signs or flags in a manner that would block the view of another person. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. We ask that you not affix items to the podium or dais or walls or other surfaces of the chambers. Signs, flags, or other items used to communicate must be held by one person when displayed. Obscenity, other epithets based on race, gender, or religion, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the meeting will not be tolerated. In-person participants are asked to refrain from expressing support or disagreement verbally or with sounds such as applause or snapping, with the exception of declarations. Traditionally, support is shown through American Sign Language applause or jazz hands. Thank you for listening, and again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for that, Alicia. We have two in-person speakers, Leonard Siegel and Andrew Jones, and then Lynn Siegel virtually. So Leonard, you can get us started. You have 3 minutes to speak. Can you turn the mic on, please? There's a button down there somewhere.
How's that?
There we go.
All right, thanks. Hi. Leonard Siegel speaking on behalf of the preservationists of historic Boulder. The Boulder you love didn't just happen. Historic places are an important part of expressing the spirit of Boulder. Speaking of spirit, almost 1,000 people attended the Meet the Spirits event this past weekend in the historic Columbia Cemetery. Historic Boulder was delighted to partner with the City Parks and Recreation Department on this successful event and look forward to participating on other projects, including the Civic Center. Boulder is growing and changing. In most ways, it's improving, but in some ways, it's losing its sense of itself when long-standing businesses close and important buildings are demolished. Historic preservation has been successful in saving legacy properties from the many different eras of Boulder. The Geological Society of America is an excellent example of the era when the culture of scientific innovation arrived in Boulder, starting with the first federal lab in the 1950s. Remarkably, the Geological Society built an innovative work of modern architecture instead of something old-fashioned. The architecture is bold, using concrete for the exterior skin, the interior atrium spaces, and expressing the complex waffle slab roof structure. Modern versions of monumental Roman-style arches are strategically placed at the main entrances. Broad expanses of windows bring abundant daylight inside. The architecture, as Marcy said, by Boulder's own Everett Ziegel Company, carries on the modern design approach you see in the NIST Federal Building, NCAR, and the CU Engineering Quad. Kudos to Boulder Housing Partners for recognizing the value of repurposing the original building as an anchor to their new residential community. It's an example of an ecological approach by utilizing an existing building instead of sending it to a landfill like we all have seen over the past few months with the wasteful demolition of the Harvest House. This project is an exemplary model of how preservation can add value to new developments. It preserves the superb design of the original Geological Society architecture as an inspiration for future generations of Boulder citizens. Thank you to the preservation planners and Landmarks Board staff for recommending this property as a city landmark. Historic Boulder encourages the City Council to vote to make this official. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Andrew Jones. Is Andrew in the room? All right, not seeing Andrew, so if we can go online to Lynn Siegel, please.
I would love to recommend approval of the GSA, but it's conditional. Conditional on if you don't approve the housing development. Boulder does not need more housing. It's a trade-off. I'm an ardent supporter of landmarking things, but not at the cost of the loss of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is what happens when you make these little isolated island developments, just like Wonderview. This is also a Wonderview out on Arapahoe, it's an island. There's no services anywhere around it. Same with this. This is not appropriate development. And what this particular landmarking situation brings up is the need for an integration, a multidisciplinary approach for the City Council, the Landmarks Board, and Planning Board to operate interactively and bring together their issues. And this is exactly what was argued against by Kurt Norwood Nordbach last night at the Landmarks Board. That there is no need anymore, and with other people supported this too, that there is no need anymore for an ex officio on the Landmarks Board. On the contrary, it's needed now more than ever, and this is the perfect example of it. Because I want to support the GSA, but I won't with that nightmare housing development with it. So it's contingent. My approval, my support is contingent because it's a trade-off, the lesser evil. The worst evil is that this increases wealth disparity. This kind of growth without bounds, and it draws more jobs to Boulder and less balance of the jobs housing imbalance. There's no requirements of jobs to be balanced with housing, and yet we dig ourselves constantly into a deeper and deeper hole of more housing that demands more services, that demands more jobs, low-paying jobs to provide those services, that demands more housing for those low-paid jobs. And as you know, we're in a housing crisis. So I'm sorry to say no.
Thank you for your testimony, but your time is up. All right, that brings us to the end of the public hearing, so I'll close the public hearing. I'll offer the applicant the chance to rebut the public hearing if they would like to. No? Then in that case, we can come to council for deliberation. Does anybody have any comments or a motion? Nicole.
I agree with our first speaker. This is just a really wonderful reuse of this building. And so just thank you to folks for bringing it forward to us, but also thank you to staff for helping everyone work together to make this happen. It's pretty exciting.
Lauren? No? Okay, well, not seeing any other hands raised, I will go ahead and call on myself. And I will move that we adopt Ordinance 8652, designating the property at 3300 Penrose Place, City of Boulder, Colorado, to be known as the Geological Society of America as an individual landmark under Chapter 911, Historic Preservation, BRC 1981, and setting forth related details.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Before I do a roll call vote, I'll just echo Nicole's comments. Thank the applicant very much for this excellent preservation of a really extraordinary building. So appreciate you moving this forward while also getting us some desperately needed affordable housing for our community. So really appreciate all of that. May we do a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll start tonight's roll call for item 3A, ordinance 8652, with Councilmember Shuhart.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes.
Councilmember Wallach.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
And Marquis.
Yes.
Ordinance 8652 is hereby adopted unanimously.
All right, and Marcy, thanks so much to you and your team for all your work on this. All right, if we can go to our second public hearing item, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our second hearing on tonight's agenda is item 3B, and it is the introduction, first reading, and consideration of a motion to order published by title only, Ordinance 8664, adding a new chapter 12-6, minimum wage, Boulder Revised Code 1981, setting a local City of Boulder minimum wage to be competitive and responsive to current and future needs of its community, and setting forth related details.
Thank you so much, Alicia. We have before you a topic that is of great interest to our community, as evidenced by the many speakers that have signed up for public comment tonight. And before I pass it over to Assistant City Manager Pam Davis and former City Manager Office staffer Taylor Ryman, we want to say that there are a lot of city departments that have worked on this, from research to modeling to the presentation to the draft ordinance, a lot throughout the organization. So a big thank you to all the departments. And a reminder again, we are doing a little something different as we do simultaneous translation, and as I remind myself to speak a little slower, so that we have the opportunity for our translators to catch up and be able to provide both Spanish and English translation. We hope that you all can remember as well, and staff as they do their presentation, to take a breath and slow ourselves down. So with that, I pass it to Pam.
Thank you very much, Nuria, and good evening, council and community. My name is Pam Davis. I serve as Assistant City Manager, and I use she, her pronouns. As Nuria mentioned, I'm joined here tonight by Taylor Ryman. Taylor now serves as our Senior Sustainability Program Manager out of the Climate Initiatives Department, but has graciously seen this project from start to today and continues to support, along with several other colleagues who are here in many locations in the building and outside of the building, ready to help us phone a friend as needed with any questions you may have. For our agenda tonight, we are going to begin with Taylor providing you a brief project background on the minimum wage ordinance before you. I will then provide a brief summary of the drafted ordinance 8664. Within that ordinance discussion, we will present recommendations to resolve the approach to unemancipated minors as discussed in the draft ordinance, as well as provide some updated information related to the impacts to the city's financials if you choose a certain policy outcome tonight. We will then provide opportunity for questions from council to city staff and then open our public hearing. Following the closing of the public hearing tonight, we will then have council discussion and decision. Next slide.
Good evening, Council. My name is Taylor Ryman. My pronouns are she, her. Really cool, fancy technology we have here. Really impressed. También quiero presentarme al público en español. Hola, me llamo Taylor. Mis pronombres son ella y la. Y estoy del Departamento Iniciativas Climas. Y por el resto de la presentación hablaré en inglés y muchas gracias para estar aquí. Okay, so I'm going to cover the project background at a really high level because I know that we've heard some of this before and save some more time for council discussion and of course hearing from the public. The enabling legislation, which was passed in 2019, HB 19-1210, is the item that came from the state allowing local communities to raise minimum wages above the state limit. A few communities across the state have begun exploring that new opportunity, but there are limitations on how those policies can be enacted, including guardrails around tipped wages and how tipped employees are treated, those wages needing to apply to all employees with options for unemancipated minors or emancipated minors and contractors when it can take effect, which is January 1st, and the annual increases not being able to exceed 15% or $1.75 in any given year, whether that be escalation to a target or indexing annually thereafter. And please feel free to tap me if I'm going too fast. This next graphic shows the project geography, and the giant rectangle, which takes up the entire slide, essentially represents the state of Colorado. There in the middle is Boulder County in that light yellow, and then down in the bottom right is Denver and Edgewater in orange. Not quite to scale, but it gets the point across. Denver was the first to enact a policy in 2020, and their wage sits at $18.29. Edgewater recently enacted a policy, and their wage is at $15.02, with an escalation that will reach Denver's in a few years. Boulder County was the next to adopt a policy. This year it took effect. Right now their wage sits at $15.69, and they are planning to escalate to $25 by 2030. This next slide is the same as the last slide, just in Spanish. So for those audience members to take it in, I will continue explaining it. The blue communities there are 5 with the green magnifying glass represent the 5 communities that have been working together over the last year to study jointly public sentiment on this topic, as well as hiring a third-party consultant to perform an economic analysis. So those are the communities that have acted on this new authority, as well as the ones that are considering it. And then the rest of Colorado is at the state minimum, so all of that gray there, including those considering at $14.42. The last time we talked about this with council was August 22nd, and then another check-in at a September 5th regular meeting. Council was presented the findings from that community engagement effort, as well as that third-party economic analysis study. Council kicked off a series of 5 presentations that have now gone on across the county in those communities I mentioned: Lafayette, Louisville, Erie, Longmont, and us. At August 22nd and following that meeting, council has given us direction for most of the elements needed to draft an ordinance, those being an increase being desired in 2025, that schedule would increase 8% annually over 3 years in 2025, 2026, and 2027, after escalation, indexing annually with the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, or CPIU, an exemption for independent contractors, and deferring the enforcement needs of said policy to existing systems with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. So tonight, council considers that proposed ordinance and also has an opportunity to discuss the remaining item, which is the option for unemancipated minors. When we spoke with council, we did not yet hear from the other 4 regional partners on how their councils had reacted to the similar presentations of findings. We have then since received that feedback from those councils, and in general, there are no other councils that will be moving forward with this ordinance. In general, several councils have stated a desire for more community engagement and more study into the issue, and possibly other avenues for approaching a policy and other avenues in general for addressing community affordability. So I'll roll through that. Longmont was the first to consider this. There is no action planned for 2025 and no future discussions scheduled yet. There is a desire for more community engagement and especially understanding business pressures. There has been a couple of considerations from those council members on referring the issue to the ballot. In Lafayette, there is no action and no future discussions scheduled. There's a desire for more community engagement and analysis, and in particular to assess the breaking point for businesses while also providing benefits to low-wage workers. In Louisville, there is no action for 2025 and no future discussions scheduled. They are interested in a regional approach. And in Erie, no action for a 2025 ordinance, no future discussions scheduled. But there is interest in exploring other avenues for establishing economic equity. Okay, I got the pretty easy part. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Pam to walk us through this ordinance.
Thank you, Taylor. So this evening, you'll be considering draft ordinance 8664, and I will walk through a couple of illustrations of the main components of that ordinance. This will be the potential motion language that we just like to show a couple times throughout the presentation. Essentially, at a high level, this ordinance 8664 will establish a new chapter of the Boulder Revised Code that would establish a minimum wage for the city. This first graph that we have presented to you represents a comparison between what is contained within Ordinance 8664 in terms of a wage schedule alongside other lines in the region. So beginning from the bottom of the chart, you will see a very dark green line. That dark green line represents the escalation of the current state of Colorado's minimum wage. Directly above that, we have illustrated the trajectory of the proposed City of Boulder ordinance in purple, or at least it looked purple when we made this slide. So you can see there that the next increased wage in the region would be that proposed ordinance. Then moving above that line in a yellowish color, you can see the path of the current Boulder County minimum wage and where it is headed over the next 6 years. Above that, you can see a light green line that represents the community of Edgewater. And then finally in red, you can see the city of Denver's current minimum wage ordinance and where it rests in terms of hourly wage. Next slide. Hourly wage. Anyway. Okay. This next slide presents the table of wages in raw numbers in terms of the hourly rates of those same wages. So at the very top of this chart, again, you can see that state baseline, which in 2025, the minimum wage for the state of Colorado that no community may go below is $14.81. Then beneath that, you can see the numbers of the draft ordinance 8664. This would entail an 8% increase to the minimum wage from our current baseline over the next 3 years, followed by an index to inflation thereafter. So you can see in 2025, this ordinance would establish a minimum wage of $15.57. Beneath that, you can see the projected minimum wages for 2025 for Boulder County at $16.57, City of Denver at $18.84, and the City of Edgewater at $16.52. Next slide. So the previous two images really were that view of the wages themselves as outlined in our draft ordinance. As Taylor mentioned, there is an outstanding policy issue that did not reach council consensus when we had our study session and subsequent discussions. And so as a result, due to the state legislation's silence on the matter of unemancipated minors, we have drafted an ordinance that does exempt them as allowed under the state ordinance. Essentially, this means that for unemancipated minors, so minors still serve as dependents in their families, they would not have the minimum wage applied to their work. The second option that we can make, based on your direction, is not to exempt unemancipated minors and apply the minimum wage as established to all persons. And then finally, there is a third path that would allow council to apply the minimum wage to all persons, but identify specific exceptions for certain types of youth employment. And so we anticipate this being a component of council's discussion following the public hearing tonight. Okay, so what I have just presented to you are the main components of the ordinance 8664 itself. Now I'm going to switch gears just a little bit to share with you some updated numbers related to the fiscal impact to the city as an employer itself. These numbers have been updated based on the specifications of the draft ordinance and are different from what was presented to you as a model during our study session. So based on the terms of our current draft ordinance, the 3-year 8% increase, along with an exemption for unemancipated minors, the budgetary impact is reduced from the model that you saw in late August from us, because for the purposes of the 2025 budget and our initial conversations, we did model as conservatively as possible. In essence, we have budgeted for the most expensive of minimum wage options already, and now your policy decisions will rest somewhere below that. So as you can see, in the short term in 2025, if the draft ordinance were to pass as written, the direct impact to city finances, which would account for specific wage increases as well as for accommodating the concept of compression, which is ensuring that those who supervise minimum wage positions are at a reasonable distance in salary away from those that they supervise. That impact in the Parks and Recreation Fund in 2025 would be an increase of about $76,000. Over time, as you can see, as wages would rise, additional funds would feel an impact to a minimum wage increase, including our open space fund as well as our utilities fund. And so you can see here over time that those impacts grow and are ongoing expenses. And here again for your consideration is that motion language so that it's at the ready whenever you may need it. At this point, my presentation of the draft ordinance is complete, and we would take questions of from council, of staff, and then transition into our public hearing.
All right, thanks so much, Pam and Taylor. Really appreciate all of that information. It's very helpful. Any clarifying questions for city staff? Nicole.
So much for the presentation, the recap, and the additional information for us tonight. I just have a couple questions. Councilmember Folkerts Lauren proposed an amendment through Hotline, and if we were to follow her proposed rates, just looking at the graph you showed a few minutes ago, am I correct that we would match the city of Edgewater, the county of Boulder, and the city and county of Denver in about 2 years on January 1st, 2027?
We anticipated this question, and so we have a slightly modified graph here to show you to confirm those details. And so where you can see the now light blue line that sort of ends up third from the top on the far right of that graph, that is a representation of that model that was submitted over Hotline. And so you do see the convergence then of the 15, 8.5 and match Denver proposal. You see that by 2027, those would align.
So within a few pennies, we'd kind of be with others in the region.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question, the ordinance in our agenda is different from anything that was explored in our economic analysis and the extensive engagement we did. Do we have any information on how this modified ordinance will impact the outcomes of either the economic analysis or the engagement conclusions?
The way I would answer that is that we did not have time to do a full study of the new arrangement. However, if you think back to some of the scenarios that were modeled, essentially the takeaway is the smaller the magnitude of wage increase, the smaller the magnitude of impacts to those affected by it. And so what you would see in relation to some of those charts that were presented is that by only increasing by 8% over the next 3 years, you would see a lower number of folks being lifted out of poverty, but you would also see a lower number of businesses being experiencing financial challenges based on the wage increase.
Great.
Can I
Thank you.
colloquy on that question? Sorry, it was back on. There it is. I just wanted to follow up on Nicole's question. Regarding the study, wasn't the study also based on it being a regional minimum wage increase? And so even though we may have had unique scenarios, having a different one here really is not really directly comparative because we're the only ones acting and it's not, the study was based on a region acting. And since that's not happening, we're a little challenged in being able to make those direct assertions. Is that correct?
I believe that sounds correct. Yep.
Two quick questions. I was confused in the staff memo for the states that are listed as, quote, no law regarding wages for unemancipated minors, unquote. Does that mean they may be paid less than the minimum wage or may not? It wasn't clear to me.
You're referring to the attachment on states with different laws on unemancipated minors? Yeah. So if they have no laws on them, then I would imagine that they would just follow whatever the minimum wage is, or there might be local policies or county policies that govern how minors are treated, specifically unemancipated minors. Look to Teresa to see if she feels like that's right. Because it just looks at the state level, so it doesn't look, there's a lot of like local policy making around that.
I'm just suggesting it would be useful to understand what those states are doing and whether they're permitting unemancipated minors to be paid less or not. And just from the language, I was unclear as to what the answer was.
My recommendation, Mark, is why don't we take a moment to pull that back up and refresh our own memories and bring you that answer back following the public hearing.
That's fine. And my other question is, what's the particular relevance of comparing Boulder to the city of Edgewater versus Longmont, Lafayette, Erie, and other cities like that?
Yes, thank you for that question. So Edgewater and Denver and now Boulder County as of this year are the only communities that have chosen to adopt local minimum wages thus far. So every other one of those communities you mentioned would simply fall under the state of Colorado wages.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other raised hands, so I think we're ready to go to the public hearing. All right, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. We've got 51 people signed up to speak, either in person or online. Because we have more than 15 people, that will mean 2 minutes to speak for each speaker. I'll call 3 names at a time, and so if you're in person, if you can start coming down towards the front when you hear your name first called, that would be much appreciated. And our first 3 speakers are Ashley Rumble, Erin Shannon, and Marjorie McIntosh.
I just go?
Yeah, you're number 1, get started.
Do I have to press anything? Like a timer? Okay, good evening. My name is Ashley Rumble, and before I begin, I just want to clarify that I'm here today testifying in my personal capacity and not on behalf of my employer, the Emergency Family Assistance Association. Tonight, I urge City Council to increase minimum wage by 15% in 2025 and to create a path to catch up with Denver. The current proposal of 8% is inadequate, given the current need in the community. Growing up, I witnessed my father's small ski rental business thrive as a result of providing wages above the minimum and benefits to his seasonal employees. He didn't have to do this, but it was his commitment to fairness and respect that resulted in decades-long employee loyalty and a strong business. Like my father, you have a similar choice. You have the opportunity to uplift workers, and in doing so, strengthen our Boulder community. For the past decade, I've served as development director for EFA, Boulder's local safety net organization. And in that time, I've watched more and more that we're helping families who are facing chronic poverty as a result of low wages in this high-cost community. While 3,700 caring individuals support our work, individual charity alone cannot fix the structural inadequacies of our labor market. The safety net, frankly, is struggling to keep up with the demand. EFA and our donors alone cannot substitute for fair wages. We need you to take action. I believe it's a matter of principle. No one should have to work full-time and still live in abject poverty. So again, I appeal to your sense of fairness and your compassion and your sense of human dignity. I seek that you increase minimum wage by 15% and help lift thousands of local workers and their families out of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention, I am going to be strict about the 2-minute time limit, just in the issue of fairness for all of our speakers. So now we have Erin Shannon, Marjorie McIntosh, and Julie Van Dumlin.
Good evening, Council. My name is Erin Shannon, pronouns she, hers. I'm the Director of Education at Safe House, Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence. I've worked with survivors of DV in Boulder for the last 11 years, and it's widely recognized that 99% of victims of DV experience some form of financial abuse, which can look like, of course, an abuser controlling finances, but it's also purposefully ruining someone's credit or dragging someone through civil court again and again, draining resources. Survivors tell us all the time that concerns about being able to provide for themselves and for their families is a top reason why they'll stay with an abuser or return to an abuser. The City of Boulder has seen a 25% increase in DV. And just in 2024, we've supported 1,094 adults and children impacted by violence. Requests for counseling, legal, housing, shelter services are all up in the City of Boulder. And this in part is due to the lingering economic impacts of the pandemic and just the inability to access affordable housing. I urge you to bring back the higher proposal of an initial 15% increase now in order to directly support the self-sufficiency of those in our community most vulnerable to violence. I also want to add that as an employer, SPAN has made the choice to provide living wages for our staff of about 40 people, and we've only seen a positive impact, despite the fears often expressed over raising wages and then needing to terminate employees. We see greater staff retention, and that allows us to just provide a better and better service to victims of violence in our community. So again, I hope the city can do the same by considering a 15% increase now, followed by the 8.5% over the next coming years. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Now we have Marjorie McIntosh, Julie Van Domelen, and Commissioner Claire Levy.
Good evening. My husband and I have lived in Boulder since 1970. I encourage you to support an increase in the minimum wage of 15% in 2025 and 8.5% in each of the following 2 years. Boulder prides itself for valuing the well-being of all its residents. Raising the minimum wage is an effective way to implement that ideal, especially at a time when county and city support for nonprofits is dropping sharply. As you well know, our lowest paid workers cannot afford to support their families, even if they have 2 full-time jobs. If you raise the minimum wage 15% the first year and 8.5% thereafter, Boulder will catch up with the county and with Denver as in 2027, as you have heard. The alternative plan, an 8% increase for 3 years, is better than nothing. But after inflation, it will bring only a slight improvement to the paychecks of minimum wage workers. The 8% plan means that our Boulder workers will still earn nearly $2 less per hour than in Denver by 2027. Do not accept the Boulder Chamber's argument that not increasing the minimum wage at all would do no harm. The harm is already happening. Every year you refrain from significantly raising the wage means that workers at the bottom of our economy fall farther behind. Further, ample research shows that nearly all small businesses adapt to paying a higher wage and profit from improved worker retention. Many of you campaigned on increasing the minimum wage. Please do so now, and with a sufficiently large raise that it will actually improve the lives of those workers who provide services on which all of us rely. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Julie Van Domelen, Claire Levy, and Maria Mestas.
I have a presentation, I think. Yeah. Hi, I'm Julie Van Domelen. I'm the Executive Director at EFA here in Boulder, and I do speak for the organization. As you know, EFA supports a higher local minimum wage for the city of Boulder. We continue to see record levels of need coming into our food bank, record numbers of families losing their housing. Unfortunately, it's at a time when the safety net is contracting, the end of COVID funding. We've been announced a significant cut of county human service funding last week that will affect residents of the city across all of those agencies that get county funding. And last week's budget hearing here showed that it will be flat funding for the human services. Not good. It's a pretty favorable economic period overall. Inflation has come down, unemployment is low, we're not in a recession. Keep hearing the wonderful things that the CU buffs are bringing to town in terms of people. But I want to ask 2 things in your deliberations tonight. First, that you seriously consider, next slide, a more robust first step. It's been mentioned that lower wage jobs have not kept up with inflation over the last 2 to 3 years that you've been deliberating and studying this issue. So we're behind. Second, this is the most consequential and targeted action you can take towards equity and racial equity in particular. They'll reach thousands of people and will better meet the moment that we're seeing, as many of our nonprofits are saying, and you've got a letter from a bunch of us. I didn't know staff was going to have your great graphs, so I did one myself. The last slide, please. And while you're looking at this is what you were seeing. There's a convergence at 2027 that lets you have a decision point. If you raise 15%, I think I did 8 and 8, where you could actually decide in 3 years what that future path looks like. If you are timid now, it will be harder to make those decisions later about catching up with Denver, about the county. So please consider that first step. Thanks.
Thank you. Now we have Claire Levy, Maria Mestas, and Doug Hamilton.
Okay, good evening. The Boulder County Commissioners are asking Boulder City Council to support the lowest paid workers in our county by aligning the city's local minimum wage with the county's, beginning with a 14.9% increase over 2020 in 2025 over the state's 2024 minimum wage, and an 8.55% increase in 2025 and 2026 and 2027 for hourly rates of $16.57, $17.99, and $19.53 respectively. Regional alignment, or one wage for all of Boulder County, benefits the most workers in the long run, and we are hopeful that other towns and cities will join an aligned city and county local minimum wage next year. The county and our nonprofit partners continue to see a high demand for social services like food assistance, eviction prevention, and housing, just to name a few, as the uneven recovery from COVID-19 becomes even more evident. It is our lowest paid workers that are being hit the hardest by rising costs and the reduction in COVID-19 relief funds, and it is our lowest paid workers that will benefit the most from a local minimum wage. Conversations between the county, towns, and cities began after the state made a local minimum wage possible in 2019, but this potentially significant structural change was delayed by the pandemic. You have the opportunity to significantly improve outcomes for so many of your residents. Your consultant's report showed that aligning the city with the county would result in less than a 1% decline in current employment, while providing increased earnings to 8% of current employees and lifting 481 people out of poverty. We urge you to join us in responding to the very real need to increase wages for our lowest paid workers, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now we have Maria Mestis, Doug Hamilton, and Brad Heap.
Good evening. My name is Maria Mestas. I work at EFA. However, I do not represent EFA. I'm just speaking for myself. And I'm here asking you to vote to raise the minimum wage 15% in 2025 and create a path to catch up with Denver in the next few years. The current proposal of an 8% increase is not enough. I'm the food bank coordinator at EFA, where my responsibility is to enroll new people in our program. This work has given me firsthand exposure to those in our community who are most affected by our current minimum wage. Daily, I hear stories from our neighbors who are working so hard to provide for themselves and their children and show incredible resilience to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. Unfortunately, today, a full-time job is no longer a guarantee that a family's needs will be met. This increase would not fix that, but it would be a step in the right direction. Some of the people that I meet with every day are working full-time. They are in subsidized housing. They have food stamps. They have Medicaid. They somehow find the time in their week to come to EFA's food bank, and even then, that's still not enough to meet their basic needs. I don't know how they can be expected to make the time to advocate for an increase when they are doing all that stuff every day. I'm here today representing those who do not have the privilege to be able to speak directly to you. As you see me standing here, please imagine the 400 plus members of our community that I meet with every week, conveying the same message, which is to please not delay this further and act now to increase the minimum wage 15% in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Doug Hamilton, Brad Heap, and Curtine Metcalf.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep my comments less than a minute. So I want you to support the Folker amendments. The county commissioners are brave, and I hope you also support the county commissioners' minimum wage. The one thing I want to speak about is emancipated minors. We should not exempt, they should be included in the minimum wage that everybody else gets. We don't know why minors are working, but the one reason we do know is because they need the money. And minors, you know, the one thing money gives minors is independence. And they can do things like school programs. My neighbors and my kids pay for their own school programs with their own money. They can do things like field trips, all these things. All they can do it all without having to ask their parents for it. There's lots of kids working in this community, and they're working for the money, and they need it. And it takes the burden off their parents. So do not exempt them from the minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Brad Heap, Curtine Metcalf, and Andrew Jones.
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of my restaurant, Salt. Everyone that works at Salt is a part of my family, and I make sure that everybody gets well taken care of. Currently, everybody on my staff makes $23 an hour. All the tips are pooled, distributed throughout the entire restaurant, excluding salaried managers and myself. I know that pulling the minimum wage lever is the easiest way to put more money in people's hands for the low wage workers. However, there are other alternatives such as subsidies for rents, ways to work on affordable housing. I think you can only ask the Golden Goose to give so much. And I'm very concerned about the future of my restaurant if this is to go up. The future of my livelihood I'm not going to read off the script anymore. I'm very concerned about the future of my ability to keep my restaurant running right now. I have friends that have restaurants in Denver and their labor has gone up 10%, effectively eliminating the profit margin. And if we go too aggressive with a minimum wage increase, I'm very fearful for what's going to happen. I know that there's a lot of unintended consequences. I looked at taking over a restaurant in Niwot that was put up for lease for sale. And I did all the pro forma numbers on it, and with the county's numbers. For the first 2 years, we were making profit. The second 2 years, 28 and 29, we were down to about a 2% margin. And then 2030, we were break even at best. And that's with everything going well. And I changed the service model. I did everything I could possibly do. Right now, Niwot is without a restaurant. And, maybe that's a rich person problem, but I think we all deserve to have our voices heard. I think that's a very real commentary. I really wanted to bring my restaurant back to Niwot. I wasn't able to do it. And I worked the numbers. I'm not an economist, but I'm a businessman. I understand that you can only pay so much. And, I think it's unfortunate that people aren't not making enough money in our community.
Your time's up, but thank you for your testimony. I think we have a question for you.
Yep.
I do have a question. I was really intrigued. You said you're currently paying $23 an hour for your employees plus tips. And I'm just curious.
I didn't say plus tips.
Oh, okay. I'm
That's
sorry.
including tips.
Oh, including
And
tips.
that's for
Oh,
the
gotcha.
lowest paid employees. That's what they're making.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Our next three speakers are Curtine Metcalf, Andrew Jones, and Lindsay Loberg.
Good evening. Gosh, I'm so touched with all these impassioned speakers because I have been on both ends, and I think Boulder has changed incredibly in the last 10 years. And I have to tell you, as a first responder for 26 years, I don't know what makes anybody think that they could not fall into this place. This is a reality. You all could be up here saying, oh, please, could I have like $2 more just to pay my bills? It happens. It happens. Nobody is above that. I've been a homeowner in Boulder. I've owned 3 homes, which were, you couldn't give them away, and now you can't buy them. My first job in Boulder back in the day paid about $2 an hour plus tips at the Harvest House. And the increase over 50 years has been about 2 cents a year. Hello? Do you want us to serve Boulder as the people who care, people who go home to their states and say, wow, the people in Boulder really care. The employers care, the people who work there care. Sorry, I got really impassioned. Statistically, Boulder County ranks 6th of the highest median income in Colorado, twice as high as Denver, ranked 12th. Yet Denver's minimum wage is up there. What's the difference? Is it like I have money and you don't? Throughout my decades in Boulder, 95% of my jobs have been with locally owned businesses. And these businesses have made a point to take care of their employees, which, as some of these business owners have stated, creates loyalty. So all I can say is we're the plebeian workforce. Look the word up if you don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Andrew Jones, Lindsay Loberg, and Sandra Manso Palma. Is Andrew here now? I don't think Andrew's here, so I think we're going to go to Lindsay Loberg next.
Mayor, before my time starts, can I ask a question about the interpretation?
Clarification on interpretation?
It's going now for the public comment too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to note that it's like 1 minute, 15 seconds to 2 minutes for thoughtful, intentional English to Spanish interpretation. So it would be nice, like on the sign-up page, to have a note about that, just so we can plan on less time to speak slowly enough.
Okay, point taken.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lindsay Loberg. I'm here to encourage you to approve a minimum wage increase that keeps pace with Denver and has no age restrictions. I'm one of the directors of Boulder Food Rescue. We're a local food access nonprofit that employs 11 people, and our lowest paid staff member is paid more than $25 per hour right now. And we've accomplished this by prioritizing wage equity and placing limits on pay disparities between our highest paid staff and our lowest paid staff. And if our small nonprofit can do it, we think that other businesses can do it too. That's not to say it's been easy. In fact, it's been really challenging. And one reason it's been really challenging is because the demands on the human service nonprofits are massive. They're unrealistic. They're unsustainable in the ways that people who represented other nonprofits were talking about. And those burdens are ultimately felt by our sector's workers and by the participants of these programs. So there are two main reasons that's the case. Employers pay wages that are below what it costs to live and what workers deserve. And two, because social safety nets in the US are insufficient. So let's put number one in perspective. If we're talking about what one adult with one child needs to live in Boulder, we need to be talking about wages that are more in like the $33 an hour range. And those numbers are from 2022. They're not from this year. Social safety nets are insufficient. And this is why concerns about benefits cliffs are best addressed by more aggressive increases. There aren't enough of the benefits available for the need, affordable housing. The qualification amounts are too low, far too low for the number of people who need them. Medicaid.
Your time's up, but
I'll email you the rest. Thank you.
thank you. Now we have Sandra Manso Palma, Aiden Reed, and Katie Farnan.
I will speak in Spanish. In Spanish will be a translation for me.
Yes. Okay. Un momento, señora. We'll go to Aiden Reed. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
Vamos a regresar a usted.
All right, good evening, Council. My name is Aiden. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm here to urge you to raise Boulder's minimum wage to be in line with Denver's by 2027, starting with a 15% increase in 2025, followed by an 8.5% increase in 15% increase in 2025, followed by an 8.5 increase in, nope, that's wrong. 50% increase in 2024, followed by an 8% increase in 2025 and 2026, to be on track with Denver's by 2027. And increasing with inflation after 2027. Further, I urge you to not exclude unemancipated minors from the increases. The people who will benefit most from this increase are not just ice cream scooping teenagers. They're working moms and dads, they're senior citizens, and they make our lives possible, providing the services that we don't want to. In a few short weeks, we will vote to raise council's pay to be 40% of area median income for councilors and 50% for the mayor. Boulder's current minimum wage, imagine if those numbers were based on Boulder's current minimum wage rather than its area median income. I cannot imagine you would be enthusiastic about that. I urge you to listen to your constituents and raise Boulder's minimum wage to be in line with Denver's by 2027. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra?
Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone.
Primeramente y antes que nada,
First of all, before anything else,
quiero agradecerle a Dios por la providencia de mi vida.
I would like to thank God for the blessings of my life.
Quiero empezar por mi historia, de mi testimonio. Yo soy Sandra Manso Palma, soy una mamá con una pequeña de 2 años, casi ya 3 años.
I would like to start by the history of my testimony by saying I am Sandra Manso And I'm a mother and I have a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old child.
Le doy gracias a Dios, a mi familia, por la independencia que logré en el 2023 de agosto 2.
I would like to give thanks to God and to my family for the independence that I was able to achieve on August 2nd, 2023.
Sobre mi condición de salud mental de mis beneficios.
Because of my mental health condition and my benefits.
Entonces agarré la fuerza y la voluntad que había ya en mí, agarré un trabajo, empecé de lo más mínimo, trabajando las horas mínimas y agarrando casi ya las 40 horas.
And I got strength and willpower, and I was able to get a job, and I got minimum wage at the beginning, and I was working minimum hours, and then I worked up to 40 hours.
Ahora mi pregunta es que no estoy logrando mi objetivo económicamente porque estoy ganando lo mínimo y no puedo sustentar a mi familia.
And now my question is, I'm not able to achieve my goal because I earn minimum wage and I'm not able to support my family.
Esta oportunidad que tengo ahora es dirigirme ante ustedes, Corte Municipal, que nos ayuden a nosotros, personas trabajando lo mínimo, para que podamos sustentar nuestra familia.
And I've had to come to you all and also to the municipal court to be able to work to support myself on a minimum wage.
Y seamos lo suficientemente felices y preparados para nuestra familia y seamos como todos necesitamos vivir en paz, tranquilos y confiados que nos va a alcanzar el dinero.
And we all need to be able to be happy, and we're prepared to have all that we need to be able to live in peace and to be able to support ourselves.
Y muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much to everyone.
Muchas gracias, señora. Okay, now we have Katie Farnan, Kristen Eller, and Alejandra Beatty.
Thank you. My name is Katie Farnan. I'm here to ask you to vote for the 15% minimum wage increase in 2025. I read Lauren Folkert's piece in the Daily Camera, and it inspired me to come today. I haven't been here in a while. First of all, the title, the fact that we have people in Boulder working 9 to 5 and they still can't make ends meet here. And there's no way for them to live on their wages here. And then this part, quote, Denver's cost of living is 15% lower than Boulder's, and its 2024 minimum wage is 27% higher than ours. We need to do the 15% for 2025 to account for inflation, and then 8.5% to get to where Denver is by 2027. And there shouldn't be exemptions for unemancipated minors. Young people who are employed here should be a part of the pool. Including them helps families overall. I spend all my time in Boulder. I do all my shopping in Boulder. My kids go to school here. When my son needed care this summer, he got that care from the hospital here in Boulder. And all of these places that make Boulder livable for us employ in part or in whole hourly workers. Now, a lot of those places pay competitive wages, but the baseline pay, the minimum wage, being $14.42 an hour means that a lot of the jobs that we all in this room rely on, the jobs that are being done right now, are being done by people who are not making ends meet. That's not okay, and we have to do something. So a middling increase that is swallowed up by inflation won't move the needle, and I really want you all, because I know you care about workers, to really make a meaningful vote. And that's why I support the 15% minimum wage. Our economy doesn't work unless it works for everyone. So please vote on the stronger minimum wage increase. Thanks.
Thank you. Now we have Kristen Eller, Alejandra Beatty, and Caleb Robertson.
Hi, Council. First, I wanted to say that I don't need to repeat the exact words of what everyone else has said in terms of where we should be. I believe in the 3 things that are proposed in Folkert's amendment, and I think specifically we need to make sure that we meet Denver's minimum wage by 2027. We can't go slower. We need to be able to meet it where they are, because I know we can do it. How we treat our minimum wage workers and the people that make the lowest wage within our city directly reflects how we view our city and how we view our people. By supporting the minimum wage workers, we want to ensure that people can live and work in our city of Boulder, can raise families on this wage. Something I specifically wanted to call out is that I think we all recognize how much work you all do, and that's why we understand that you aren't currently compensated adequately. That's why there will be a question on the ballot to give city council members a living wage, and now your constituents are flipping that and asking the same of you, are saying that they currently are not making an adequate amount to live in Boulder and to be able to raise children and not live within poverty. We're not even trying to ask to raise to an adequate living wage. We're specifically just asking to raise the minimum wage above what it is now. So, with the roles reversed, will you support the needs of the people that you represent? Thank you.
Thank you. Now Alejandra Beatty, Caleb Robertson, and Ana Casas Ibarra.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Council. Alejandra Beatty, she, her pronouns. I am president for the Boulder Area Labor Council, representing a couple thousand families in your area, as well as a member of the Coalition for Self-Sufficiency Wage. I know a letter was dropped off earlier today. I'm sure you've had plenty of time to read all of your emails, reiterating our position. We're excited to participate with you all in this historic moment. It's really great and heartwarming to see Boulder making the step to support your workers. We urge you, though, to consider the Folkert Amendment because of all of the challenges that are happening at this economic levels. We need to help workers, and I'm excited to continue to help workers in this area, help them build unions, help them get better wages, but we need to start with this basic. This is the one key that you all have. I was also very excited to hear that the Boulder County Dems last night voted unanimously to support exactly telling everybody, all electeds, to follow the lead of the Boulder County Commissioners and get with everybody together so that we are supporting the entire county. I'm paraphrasing just a little bit there. So really excited about what's going to happen here. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. I will say that yes, for minors, everybody deserves a living wage. When we start to see wages get actually towards a living wage, let's figure out some programs. I love apprenticeship programs. That's a good way to do that. But let's not underpay people just because of their age. Let's figure out other programs that help folks instead. Appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Now we have Caleb Robertson, Ana Casas Ibarra, and Len Harris.
Hello all, my name is Caleb Robertson. I'm a CU buff, and I'm currently have a job in Boulder where I make minimum wage. I've been working since I was 15. I've worked in Tennessee and I've worked in Colorado Springs. In Tennessee, I made $7.25 an hour. In Colorado Springs, I made $11, $12, and $13 an hour. So it's safe to say I've made paychecks and I've attempted to pay bills on those paychecks. I would like to present you guys with the choice that I make. I can choose to allocate all of my money towards my tuition, or I can choose to allocate my money to housing costs. But it's important to express I cannot do both. I'm not asking you for a handout. I'm asking you to deliver me the tools for me to work through my school. And additionally, I think it's important to highlight that everybody here today that's arguing for the affirmative is not asking for a handout. We're simply asking for tools. And I would like to thank the city officials for their presentation, the business owner from before, and everybody else speaking today. I would also support the incorporation of emancipated minors. That is why you should consider this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Ana Casas Ibarra, Len Harris, and Kunal McCabe.
Hello. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you for providing interpretation. My name is Ana Karina Casas Ibarra. I have lived in the city of Boulder for over 24 years. My husband and I work in the city of Boulder, and my children go to school here in Boulder, not in Lafayette, not in Longmont, not in Louisville, here. Today I'm here to ask you to raise the minimum wage in the city of Boulder. My family came to the U.S. in 1999. My mother came here escaping an abusive marriage. Throughout the years, she has had many jobs and at times held multiple jobs to be able to make ends meet. In the early 2000s, she worked for a small business in Boulder. She was the only employee at first. At this job, she was getting paid minimum wage. Sometimes she worked 12 hours a day, overtime that she was not getting paid for. Her wages were being stolen, and she was also sexually abused by this guy. I'm telling you this story not so you can feel sorry for her or to victimize her. She is the strongest woman that I know. I am telling you this story because this happens every day to people in my community, in our community. And sadly, those businesses that pay minimum wage for their personal gain also tend to abuse their employees. It is unjust that a segment of our community has to make less than 15 an hour, hold multiple jobs, live in poverty, and go to food banks so others can live well. I am telling you this not to victimize my community, but to remind you that no matter the conditions, we are there doing the work. We contribute immensely to our local economy. So you need to act now, not 8% for 3 years. It's not enough. So you need to propose and pass an ordinance that increases the minimum wage 15% the first year and 8.5 the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Lynn Harris, Connell McCabe, and David Schwartz.
Good evening. Thank you so much for letting me speak today. My name is Len Harris. I'm the Young Worker and Community Organizer for the Colorado AFL-CIO. It represents 180 unions and over 130,000 workers across the state of Colorado. About 2,500 of those workers are in Boulder. I'm here tonight to ask you to support the proposal to raise the Boulder minimum wage according to the Folkerts Amendment, 15% for 2025, and then 8.5 for the remaining 3 years, or 2 years, apologies. I've seen the impact the increased cost of living in Boulder has had on the ability of our members to cover their basic needs and still live and work here. But I also have a personal connection to this issue. I used to live in Boulder. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to edit my document at the same time. This is the worst. Okay. I used to live in Boulder, but I was priced out because of rising costs and stagnant wages. If someone like me struggled to make ends meet, and at the time I was not on minimum wage, how could someone possibly do that at $14.42 an hour now? I was happy when the state finally allowed cities to set their own minimum wage in 2019, which is the law that was tailor-made for Boulder since our cost of living is so much higher than the rest of the state, as we heard earlier today. Our city's minimum wage should be increased to reflect that reality. The longer wages stay low, the faster communities erode. If workers cannot afford to stay and or commute, they leave, businesses leave, waterfall effect. As a union organizer, working with businesses is our priority. If we don't have a place of business, we don't have a job. We are actively working on helping bolster businesses while not allowing the life of that business, the workers, be primary victims of the consequences. We know the people in our city more likely to make low wages are disproportionately women and people of color. If the council votes to increase the minimum wage starting next year until it reaches $19.52 an hour by 2027, it would be a much needed step that will meaningfully increase the opportunity for these communities starting January 1st, 2025. Please raise the wage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, can I approach the clerk to?
Sure, go ahead and leave something up here. Now we have Connell McCabe, David Schwartz, and Peter Krause.
Do I press a button? Or is it going? Good evening. I'm a physicist at CU and a proud Irish immigrant in Boulder. I give half my wages to a local business, my landlord. Still, I make 2.5 times the minimum wage, so I'm lucky by comparison. I've heard concerns about what might happen when cities raise their minimum wage. Take Denver, for example. When they increased their minimum wage, there were fears that employment rates would drop compared to neighboring cities. Many of our local businesses in town work on razor-thin margins, and they might argue that they cannot afford an increase. Given Boulder relies mostly on sales tax for most of its budget, this would be quite concerning. When Denver rose its minimum wage, employment declined more than the state average. You might wonder if the businesses suffered. After all, if wages are raised, those minimum wage workers are off on holidays, luxury, in Aspen, skiing and the like, you know? Denver sales tax revenue actually grew more than its neighboring cities. And the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment say that the service industry sales tax revenue increased 85%, even accounting for COVID bounce back compared to neighboring cities. Those minimum wage workers in Boulder, if they see an increase, will spend it here on essentials, contributing to our local economy. Now, if we're debating exempting minors due to inexperience, shouldn't we do the same for senior workers? They have cognition decline, slower reflexes, the like. Of course, these are complete stereotypes. So why do we do the same for minors? Do not use someone's age who will use their wage to pay for their tuition at CU or help their family out as a justification to lower their wage. Support including minors in this minimum wage increase. I applaud the City Council and the staff, and you've done a great job in considering all the angles, but raising the minimum wage in line with the Folkert Amendment for all workers, regardless of age, is the rational decision. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Connell. Next up, we have David Schwartz, followed by Peter Krause and Dave Query.
Good evening, council members. I'm the Reverend David Schwartz, minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. The current minimum wage doesn't come close to providing the resources a person needs to live. And because of that, my church steps up, just like all the religious communities in the city, and I have a letter from other faith leaders to share after my remarks. We step up. We run food drives and clothing drives and toy drives. We help with rent and grocery cards and healthcare bills and gas money. And when we do this, your social service organizations, you've heard from them, your religious communities, are filling in the gap between the wage that's being paid and what a person actually needs to live. That is to say, we are subsidizing employers who pay their workers too little to live on. That shouldn't be our problem to solve for you. The church I serve, like all of the religious communities in town, works for the full flourishing of our members. And as an employer, we've chosen to provide a living wage to all our employees above what's contemplated here. I don't want my team to scrape by. I don't want my community, my neighbors to scrape by. You don't either. The inaction of our neighboring cities gives you great cover to do nothing. You could easily do like Longmont did and gather more data and get more input and delay for now. And I get the impulse to dodge the question. It's a difficult thing to balance the hopes and anxieties of your constituents. But my job is less complex. My job is to say simply and directly that it is unjust to allow employers to pay a wage that keeps people in poverty and unfair to expect religious communities and social service organizations to subsidize unjust pay. I urge you to move as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Now we have Peter Krause, Dave Query, and Evan Ravitz.
I hope your eyes don't glaze over. This comes out of the fire hose. Dear Mayor, Council, and staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Pizza Pete Krause. My daughter Katie Pie and I founded a restaurant in November of 2010 called iPie. This is a story about the American dream. Someone wants to make America great again. To make us great again, we would have to be less than great now. America is the land of opportunity, the shining light on the hill. People flee criminality and structural oppression of their homelands, hiking through jungles, fording rivers, brazing razor wire for a chance to be in America. American exceptionalism is only an idea that if a person makes it to America, works hard, living below or within their means, they can achieve heights unimaginable in their homelands. Gratefully, American exceptionalism and the American dream are alive and well, as evidenced by the people attempting to cross our borders. I met a first-generation American this week. His parents fled Laos after the Vietnam War around 1980. They're Hmong, Vietnam War refugees. When the communists ascended to power, they sought American collaborators to punish, so they fled. Some of these political refugees ended up in Colorado. The man's parents came to the United States with their clothes on their backs. Penniless upon arrival, they worked tirelessly, persevered, thrived, and are now enjoying gardening and cooking in their retirement. Their son works in a Colorado business, running a computer that manufactures machine parts. He is an educated, industrious, hardworking American, and we are blessed to call him and his family our fellow citizens. He stressed to me that the American dream is stronger than ever, and achieving it is the result of hard work. We are humanists that love people. We started iPie to use our business to make the world a better place, starting with the communities in which we live and operate. We own a small business that enriches the lives of our staff. We treat our staff with respect. We pay them above average wages, and we reward exceptional effort. While the goal of minimum wage is to ensure that people have a living wage, it does have real-life consequences of fueling inflation, encouraging automation, and discouraging potential entrepreneurs from bearing the risk of founding businesses. Another path forward is imagining how we can
So your
encourage
time is
small
up,
businesses
but thank
using
you for your
public-private
testimony.
partnerships to educate and incentivize
So
people.
your time is up, sir. Your time is up. Thank you. All right. We got now we got Dave Query, Evan Ravitz, and John Taylor.
Hello. Thank you all for your work on this. It's not an easy topic. Very precarious. I'm maybe the third person to speak, maybe in a different tone than what the previous speakers, although I appreciate everything everyone has said, and I've learned a lot tonight. No one wants restaurant workers to make more than restaurant owners. We have a lot of longevity with our staff. We take very, very good care of our people. Tip pooling is something that I'm not sure everybody understands. So when we made the choice coming out of COVID to go to tip pooling, we decided that we were going to pay $3 more per hour because the minimum wage is $3.02 less than the tipped wage. So by doing that, our 800 employees, the lowest is $24 an hour. Our cooks, who are usually a group of people of color and in our kitchens, are making $28 to $32 an hour. And the tip pooling comes at a great expense to us to do the right thing. So Boulder has always been an innovator, and I have said this to many of you. I hope that you can try and figure out a way to identify companies that are paying. I give Lindsay and the work that she's doing at Food Rescue huge props for paying her staff $25 an hour. In a food rescue situation, in a nonprofit, it's really, really tough. But don't be fooled by just because Denver is doing this that it's working. You were sent 16 articles that had hard facts of how it's not working in Denver, how restaurants are failing, how people are leaving, and when that happens, the very people you're trying to help will lose jobs, sales tax revenues will fall, and the entire socioeconomic situation of legacy restaurants will change, and it'll be a long-lasting, very, very formidable change. The restaurant margins are tiny. Just because a restaurant's busy doesn't mean it's profitable. And so it's a really, really big thing for restaurants. And again, I applaud everything and every view everyone has in here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Evan Ravitz, John Taylor, and Robert Lindgren. Is Evan in the room? All right. John Taylor, looks like you're up.
Hello, Mayor, council members. I am John Taylor, President and CEO of the Boulder Chamber. I have 2 minutes to say 5 things. So first, I'm going to start by applauding the process of analysis for the minimum wage. Taylor, Lauren, great, excellent job, including the business community and the analysis that was performed. I want to thank you for that process. And I also want to make sure that it's clear that the concerns that have been addressed around the needs of our lower wage workforce, absolutely something that we share. We look to always be supportive of those programs that lift all of our residents. And that's why we, as the Boulder Chamber, are proud to say that we were the only chamber across the state that supported the statewide minimum wage increase in 2017. However, I stand here today to asking you not to support this minimum wage increase just for the city of Boulder. It is the wrong tool. It lacks the flexibility, and we have examples of that. First of all, the example that have been demonstrated or spoken to by our restaurant community. The tip wage considerations that they have to work with every day means that they are paying more for the restaurant for their waiters than well above the minimum wage, and it has a huge cost to their restaurants. And if we've seen in Denver, they have lost significant restaurants, about 184 restaurants net in 1 year since raising the minimum wage. That's real impact. We also see the impact to nonprofits that have a mission. hiring individuals who have disabilities, they hired those individuals as part of their mission. They will be forced to lay off these individuals because of the higher minimum wage that they will not be able to afford. And the ultimate irony is this minimum wage increase will lift fewer people out of poverty that will lose their jobs as a result of the minimum wage increase, according to the analysis. Okay.
Time's up. Feel free to email us the rest of your testimony.
I will, thank you.
All right, now we've got Robert Lindgren, Anne Marie Jensen, and Laura McGuire.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Robert Lindgren. I'm a volunteer at the great KGNU Radio here in Boulder, and I'm with the Colorado AFL-CIO. We're an organization of union members throughout the state and in the city of Boulder. Our members clean the halls of CU, help keep our environment clean at the EPA, and clear the highways. I'm here to speak in support of raising the minimum wage. We heard from our phone bank community at the start of this, and I think it's telling that they were the first to sign up to speak. I grew up at the phone bank. I only realized later that my grandma Gloria had to spend so much time there because we got 2 boxes of food instead of 1 through our volunteer. It was much needed at the time. And raising the minimum wage would have had a material benefit to my family with my mom's job at the tire shop at Montgomery Wards. Also, emancipated minors working could be helping themselves or their families and contributing to the household out of necessity. I applaud you for taking action, and I ask you to support an increase to $19.52 by 2027 without a carve-out for emancipated minors. And just to speak a little bit to the restaurant argument that we've heard, restaurants have been able to adapt to a small increase, measured increase to the minimum wage. And the biggest challenge they have is that first year, establishing a customer base and being able to really innovate and have something for their customers. Increasing the minimum wage could make it so that they're able to actually keep their workers longer and create a better experience for folks. Those restaurants that innovate, those restaurants that have longevity are the ones that are able to really thrive in this sort of environment like Boulder. Again, thank you so much for your time and allowing me to speak. Please listen to KGNU Radio.
Thank you. Now we have Anne Marie Jensen, Laura McGuire, and Letty Garcia.
Hi, my name is Anne Marie Jensen. I am a regional affordable housing advocate and a member of Together Colorado. Together Colorado is a faith-based organization where our leaders work and organize to create a society where everyone can thrive without exception. But right now, one of the exceptions to thriving are the low-wage workers in our community. And I've crossed out a whole bunch of what I've already written, but our workers are effectively being paid less than workers in Sterling, Yuma, Alamosa. You can start naming it because the cost of living is lower there and the wage is the same. I know you heard from a lot of businesses, but less visible than businesses are families. And these families who are working 2 and 3 jobs, the people who are suffering are the children, the mental health of the people in those families. We urge you to support the Boulder County proposal, the amendment that is coming from Councilmember Folkerts, and not to have an exception for young people. You know, those young people may be saving for school, they may be supporting their family, they may be, as was mentioned, taking the opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities that'll give them an opportunity to get a better education. So we encourage you to support the Boulder County proposal and make a difference, a real difference for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Laura McGuire, Letty Garcia, and Juana Parga. Is Laura McGuire here? Not seeing her, so we'll go to Letty Garcia.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Leticia García. Yo he vivido en Boulder por 25 años y aunque actualmente vivo fuera de los límites de la ciudad, mi esposo, mi hija y yo trabajamos y hacemos la mayoría de nuestras compras en la ciudad de Boulder. Las decisiones que se toman aquí nos afectan a nosotros todos los días.
Good evening. My name is Leticia Garcia. I have lived in Boulder for 25 years, and although I currently live outside the city limits, my husband, daughter, and I work and do most of our shopping in the city of Boulder, and the decisions that are made here affect us every day.
Somos una familia de 4. Mis 2 hijas están en la universidad. Una ya está haciendo su maestría con la meta de tener su doctorado. Esto con el propósito de algún día ganar lo suficiente para poder vivir una vida independiente. Ella ha estado trabajando al mismo tiempo y aunque son trabajos profesionales, no gana lo suficiente para poder vivir por su propia cuenta porque no le alcanza.
We are a family of
I'm
four.
sorry, Madam Translator, if you could get into the microphone more, please.
We are a family of 4. My 2 daughters are in college. One is already working on her master's degree with the goal of getting her PhD, with the purpose of someday earning enough to be able to live an independent life. She has been working at the same time, and although they are professional jobs, she does not earn enough to be able to live on her own because it is not enough.
Cuando mi esposo y yo llegamos a este país, nosotros ganábamos el salario mínimo. Mi esposo tenía 2 trabajos y yo hasta 3 para poder sobrevivir. En la actualidad ya no gano el salario mínimo, pero sigo teniendo múltiples trabajos, incluyendo mi pequeño negocio de limpieza. Yo contrato a una persona porque ella me ayuda y le pago más del salario mínimo que tiene Denver, porque yo valoro el trabajo de las personas y sé lo difícil que es vivir con un salario mínimo.
When my husband and I came to this country, we both earned minimum wage. My husband worked 2 jobs, and I even worked up to 3 jobs to make ends meet. Today, I no longer make minimum wage, but I still work multiple jobs, including my small cleaning business, and I've hired a person to help me, and I pay that person more than Denver's minimum wage because I value people's work, and I know how hard it is to live on minimum wage.
Si nosotros que no ganamos el salario mínimo tenemos que tener múltiples trabajos para poder sobrevivir, imagínense lo que hacen las familias que están ganando el salario mínimo.
If we, who do not make minimum wage, have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, imagine how the people who are making minimum wage are doing.
Este es mi testimonio, pero conozco las historias de mucha gente de mi comunidad, ya que mi trabajo como promotora del Centro Amistad me permite llegar a los hogares de muchas familias. Y créanme que aquellos negocios que suelen pagar salario mínimo también tienden a abusar laboralmente de sus empleados. Se aprovechan de las situaciones de necesidad en las que se encuentran nuestras familias, nuestra comunidad migrante.
This is my testimony, but I know the stories of many people in my community. And since my work as a promotora with Centro Amistad allows me to reach the homes of many families, and believe me that those businesses that tend to pay minimum wage also tend to abuse their employees. They take advantage of the situation of the need in which our families, our migrant community, find themselves.
Escuchen nuestras voces, por favor. Regresen a la propuesta más alta de aumentar el salario mínimo al 15% el primer año y 8% por lo menos los siguientes 2 años o hasta alcanzar a Denver. Y muchas gracias por la interpretación.
Listen to our voices. And please go back to the higher proposal of raising the minimum wage 15% the first year and then 8.5% for at least the next 2 years or until we catch up to Denver. Thank you very much, and thank you for the interpretation.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias, señora. Now we have Juana Parga, Lorena Safala, and Peter Waters. Okay, Juana Parga is not here. So we have Lorena Safala.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Lorena Zavala, yo soy residente de Boulder, he vivido aquí por 22 años, mi esposo, 2 de mis hijas y yo trabajamos en Boulder y mi hija más pequeña va a Centennial Middle School. Esta es mi primera vez dando testimonio frente al Consejo Municipal y estoy aquí para pedirles que aumenten el salario mínimo de Boulder.
Good evening. My name is Lorena Zavala. I'm a resident of Boulder. I've lived here for 22 years. My husband, 2 of my daughters, and I all work in Boulder, and my youngest daughter goes to Centennial Middle School. This is my first time testifying in front of City Council, and I am here to ask them to raise Boulder's minimum wage.
Cuando mi esposo y yo llegamos a este país ganábamos salario mínimo. Los dos teníamos múltiples trabajos para poder sobrevivir. Mi esposo se iba a trabajar a las 6 de la mañana y regresaba después de las 11 de la noche. Él perdió mucho de la niñez de mi hija, no las vio crecer.
When my husband and I first came to this country, we earned minimum wage, and he worked multiple jobs, and we worked multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. My husband would leave for work at 6 in the morning and returned after 11 at night. He missed a lot of my daughter's childhood. He did not see them grow up.
Y aunque hoy en día ya no ganamos salario mínimo, aún así tenemos que tener múltiples trabajos, porque la situación en esta ciudad se ha puesto más difícil. Todo cuesta más y sigue subiendo. Tenemos gastos médicos y tenemos que ayudar a mi hija mayor a pagar su universidad.
And even though today we no longer earn minimum wage, we still have to work multiple jobs because the situation in this city has become more difficult. Everything costs more and keeps going up. We have medical expenses, and we have to help my oldest daughter pay for college.
Mis dos hijas mayores están en la universidad, pero una de ellas tiene DACA y no puede acceder a asistencia financiera. A pesar de que ambas trabajan, todavía viven con nosotros porque sus salarios son mínimos y aunque reciben propinas, nunca podrían vivir por su cuenta en Boulder.
Both of my daughters are in college, but one of them has DACA and cannot access financial aid. Even though they both work, they still live with us because they have minimum wages, and even though they receive tips, they could never live on their own in Boulder.
Como promotora de salud del Centro Amistad, conozco las historias, sacrificios y las luchas diarias de nuestra comunidad inmigrante. Nosotros realizamos trabajos arduos y desgastantes, tanto físicos como mentalmente, y recibimos los salarios más bajos. Es evidente que nuestra comunidad merece muchos más reconocimientos y apoyo.
As a health promotora, I know the stories, sacrifices, and daily struggles of our immigrant community. We work hard, physically and mentally exhausting jobs, and receive the lowest wages. It is clear that our community deserves much more recognition and support.
Por favor, regresen a la propuesta más alta de aumento del salario mínimo al 15% el primer año y por lo menos el 8% los siguientes 2 años para alcanzar a Denver. Gracias por la interpretación.
Please return to the higher proposal you have of raising the minimum wage to 15% the first year and at least 8.5% the following 2 years in order to catch up to Denver. Thanks for the interpretation.
Muchas gracias, señora. All right, our final two in-person speakers are Peter Waters and Kathy Partridge.
Good afternoon, and thank you for hearing us out tonight. My name is Peter Waters. I am the current owner of Tiaco and the former owner of the former Ruthie's that we had to close last month. I'm here tonight to clarify the impact that this minimum wage is having on restaurants at the moment. But I first want to thank you guys for hearing us out. And for those of you that responded to my emails and met in person, which is about half the council, I'm really appreciative of your time. Minimum wage is not livable wage. It is just that. It is the bare minimum. And anybody who takes advantage of people for that should be ashamed of themselves here. I think that's the one thing we all have in common today, that and we want what's best for our employees, which are citizens of this beautiful, amazing city. Restaurants are doing their best right now. It's coming off a very tumultuous time. Tiaco is an average size restaurant at about 50,000 labor hours per year. The proposed increases would have a first year cost on the 8% increase of $59,500 for us to make up. Year 2 would be $129,000 for us to make up, and year 3 would be $202,000 per year going forward. And I imagine that number is only going to go up, that we would somehow have to come up with. The most recent proposal of 15% increase would cause a increase in labor of $116,000 year 1 and $193,000 in year 2. There's no doubt that we have an issue in this town with housing and other expenses, but minimum wage, since it's been established, since the inflationary index has been established in Colorado, has outpaced inflation. Sadly, Boulder's rents and cost of living has even outpaced that by about 3x. There's levers, and we're pulling the wrong one. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, last in-person speaker is Kathy Partridge.
Good evening, members of Boulder City Council. My name is Kathy Partridge, and I'm a leader of Together Colorado Boulder County, and I ask you to vote yes to increasing the wage with no age restrictions. The sudden passing of my dad left my mom suffering with dementia without her caregiver. When we moved Mom here to be near me, I became acutely aware of how my family is dependent on minimum wage workers. I experienced how even in our quality memory care residences, there is high turnover of service workers due to their minimum wage status. This was debilitating to my mom because of a constant flow of unfamiliar faces. For me, it was hard to track what was going on with Mom from day to day. The workers I interacted with, who meant so much in my mother's life, are earning the statewide minimum. This income fails to match the high cost of living in our area and doesn't recognize the high demands of these important jobs. And I worry that if an unemancipated sub-minimum wage is set, that will tempt these corporations to turn these important jobs into a revolving door of short-term part-time jobs that will cause further distress to our most vulnerable elders. Please vote yes on the Sphere Folks Amendment and increase the city's minimum wage to $15.58 an hour in 2025 and ending at $19.52 in 2027 with no discrimination because of age. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to our first three virtual speakers now, who are Lisa Sweeney Moran, Mary Faltinsky, and Lynn Siegel.
Hi, I'm Lisa Sweeney Moran, CEO of Haven Ridge Homeless Shelters. I want you to understand how intense the need really is. We have people living in our shelters who are working at minimum wage and who literally can't afford to move out of a homeless shelter, especially the single parents. Community members across our city are having to choose between food and diapers, between housing and childcare. They don't just want a better increase, they're desperate for it. For example, the average cost of an hour of daycare in the city is $18 to $22 an hour, which is about 30% higher than our minimum wage before tax. So what do we want? Do we want young families living here? Do we want a vibrant community with thriving schools and busy parks? Or do we want a retirement village of wealthy homeowners who rely on a commuter class of workers? It starts here with doing more for people making the least. We cannot rely on nonprofits to do it all. I know we're concerned about small businesses. Haven Ridge is a small business. We employ about 15 people. We pay more than what is proposed here to an all lived experience staff. And it hasn't been easy, but it's been the right thing to do. It can be hard to increase wages, but we cannot balance our budgets on the backs of our staff. So tonight, I hope you'll do what's right and plan our increases so that we match the county, or failing that so that we at least match Denver by 2027. Additionally, I hope you will not exclude minors from these increases. So many of these young people are doing everything they can to support themselves or their families, and they deserve our support in return. Thank you again for your commitment to our city and for making sure we don't go another year without doing what's right. Your work and your time are appreciated.
Thank you. Now we have Mary Faltinsky, Lynn Siegel, and Eric Budd.
Hello, my name is Mary Faltinsky, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I wanted to talk about how this minimum wage vote that you're having isn't just economic policy, it's social policy. The National Bureau of Economic Research, which is a 100-year-old nonpartisan research institution, has reported that a $1 increase in the minimum wage is associated with a 10% increase in excellent health for household children. That same dollar also decreases the risk that those household children will be in poor health. We know that 60% of minimum wage workers are women, 44% of minimum wage workers are under 25. This means that a lot of children between the ages of 0 and 5 are living in households where people make minimum wage. So this increase will make a huge difference for their health and for their emotional health. When we enroll people in our teen parenting program, I ask them, what do you want to do that's the same as your parents did, and what do you want to do different? And one of the most common things I hear that people say they want to do different is be able to spend more time with their children. They say, my parents were good parents, but they had to work all the time. They had to work 2 jobs, and they weren't able to be home for us. So please increase the minimum wage, and please do not exclude minors from any increases in the minimum wage. The history of this lower wage for minors has its roots in the exploitation of child labor. We don't want to be supporting exploitative policies in a progressive community like Boulder. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Lynn Siegel, Eric Budd, and Sophie Merriam.
Let's go to the core. Let the developer pay. We need decent impact fees in Boulder. Then none of these people will be testifying the way they are that it's so difficult and it's so expensive. You know, I saw that slide for $75,000 a year for Parks and Recreation, going up to $550,000 a year in a few years. Like the expenses of the city, the budget, you know, it's affecting us. All of these things, the healthcare, all these things are compounded in these costs, and the developer needs to pay up impact fees. I mean, I see you people giving subsidies for heights, subsidies for parking reductions. They're doing just fine. They just need a little bit of returning back and making wealth equity, which makes it better for everybody. Rental-backed securities, they can wait and evict people so that they can raise the rent. Blackstone, Vanguard, all these huge corporations are buying up properties and throwing people out and making the rents higher and higher. And the Parks and Recreation and the homeless and all of the city functions are, and all the indebtedness of the
Your
city.
time's up, but thank you for your testimony. Now we have Eric Budd, Sophie Merriam, and Carl Lapham.
Thank you, Council. Eric Budd, I live in Boulder. I've spoken in support of raising the minimum wage several times in the past year, so I'll keep this short. I really wanted to recognize everyone that showed up tonight, especially Boulder's nonprofit and faith communities. I'm just so impressed at the work you all are doing and advocating for better wages for people. It's just absolutely terrific. And I want to highlight a couple endorsements of a higher wage. Both the Boulder County Democratic Party and Boulder Progressives have endorsed supporting a wage of $25 by 2030. And I know that's higher than being proposed here, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that those organizations are fully behind raising the wage closer to what would be livable in Boulder County. And the last thing I have to mention tonight is just something it's really been unsettling to me during this public hearing, and that's the only folks I have heard opposing this measure tonight of the speakers so far has been white men. And I'd like you all to sit with that. Alternatively, I have to say the supporters of increasing the wage tonight have been one of the most diverse set of people I have ever heard speak at City Council. And that's also notable. So I would really like you all to support a higher wage than what's being proposed. Support the excellent proposal from Lauren Folkerts, and do not exempt unemancipated minors. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have Sophie Mariam, Carl Lapham, and Laurie A. Garcia.
Good evening, City Council. Good evening, City Council. My name is Sophie Merriam, and I am a labor policy analyst at the Colorado Fiscal Institute. Council should raise the wage with the Folkerts Amendment. A significant wage increase would benefit both businesses and workers, creating a win-win situation. Not only do multiple economic data sources show that businesses aren't harmed and workers see major benefits when the wage is increased, but wage boosts have been shown to increase overall consumer spending and encourage more equitable, broad-based growth, while helping close wage gaps facing historically marginalized groups like workers of color and women. A new UC Berkeley study found that small businesses are able to adjust to minimum wage increases without seeing harmful side effects like having to cut jobs or see profit losses. In fact, a higher wage makes it easier for them to recruit and retain workers, which reduces turnover rates and can increase productivity. After raising its minimum wage, Denver saw higher job growth, earnings, and sales tax revenues compared to the rest of Colorado, as reported in 2023 by the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. While restaurants and bars might worry about increased labor costs, leading to price hikes, data shows that higher wages actually boost consumer spending, particularly on food and drink outside of the home. And Denver actually had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the state after increasing the minimum wage. The other Berkeley research suggests that higher minimum wages promote fair competition and benefit the economy, raising wages for the lowest earners and even boosting employment rates in some cases. However, unemancipated minors should not be excluded. Already, CFI's research has shown that child labor violations have increased in number and severity in recent years in Colorado by 58% since 2018, in fact. Creating a new layer of exemptions for young people sets a dangerous precedent and encourages a race to the bottom in wages and working conditions for all low-wage workers. A higher minimum wage will provide more financial resources to working families, and Boulder should raise it.
Your time is up, but thank you for your testimony. Now we have Carl Lapham, Laurie Garcia, and Michael Moss.
Hi, Council.
Actually, pardon us, Carl. We have a clarifying question for the previous speaker. Go ahead,
No
Taisha.
worries.
Wonderful, thank you. Just wanted to clarify on the study that you're referencing. Just wanted to see if it was the 2024 Center on Wage and Employment Dynamics. If so, just wanted to clarify that that was specific to fast food workers, not all workers, correct? Or are you referencing a different study?
One of the studies that I was referencing was that 2024 study. However, the Berkeley study was a little bit broader.
Okay, you can feel free to email us the.
Yeah, I can email. There's multiple studies that I was referencing.
Just
yes.
that one. Thank you.
Great, thanks for chiming back in, Sophie. And Carl, you're up now.
Hi there. My name is Carl Lapham. I'm the Boulder organizer for New Era, Colorado. You've heard from community members, organizers, business people, and coalition folks tonight about the necessity of a higher wage increase. At this point, I am unsure that I could raise any novel point that hasn't already been addressed by the people that you represent. So I'm going to keep this quick and to the point. I understand the concerns around raising the wage, including the concern that this will negatively impact Boulder's many micro businesses and the concern that this will negatively impact BIPOC-owned businesses at a disproportionate rate. I ask you to consider more seriously the disproportional effect on BIPOC workers. The reality is that the ridiculously low minimum wage and ridiculously high cost of living in Boulder is disproportionately affecting BIPOC workers now, and it is doing so on a shameful scale. Raising the wage to match Denver's will stimulate our economy, as shown in the recent economic analysis, and more importantly, it'll give mobility and freedom to groups facing disproportionate economic struggle right now. For dessert, I ask you not to abandon the next generation of community members. Stripping unemancipated minors of the right to make a fair wage speaks volume about the lack of respect, value, and humanity held for our youngest community members, and is not a message I would like to pass along. Ask yourselves if robbing young folks in your city of the right to be justly compensated for the work that they do is one that you would like written on your time as civil servants. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Laura Garcia, Michael Moss, and Sophia Solano.
Hi, I'm Lori A. Garcia, and I'm a small business owner of 21st Century Dual LLC. I contribute to the greater city of Boulder by means of a subcontractor. I want to say thank you in collaborate effort with others within my community for allowing us to voice our opinion together. That being said, a major key factor in that an increase in minimum wage by no means should be mistaken as a handout to the blue collar workers. With an increase in minimum wage, there is also inflation and tax increases. So with all three in combination, there becomes a balance. This balance creates a functioning economy. Since the 1960s, minimum wage has not kept up with the cost of living. Paying people a livable wage is an economic development. People with money spend money. This fuels our economy. This creates a good economical development once again. We believe that this increase would keep families intact and create opportunities, the true cost of doing business. This would be a positive cause within. We the people, for the people, are the people. United we stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Michael Moss, Sophia Solano, and Isabel Watson.
Good evening. Thank you so much for giving us time this evening. My name is Michael Moss, and I live in and around Boulder since 1993, and I currently own and operate Kilt Farm. We supply many local restaurants, markets, and the residents of the city of Boulder with organic produce. At my farm, I care about our employees and want them to be treated well and paid fairly. Our farm business exists with extraordinarily tight financial margins. The City of Boulder residents undeniably value local food and will pay a premium for it, but there is a definite ceiling on what we can charge to help offset increased costs. I currently pay all of my staff, including those with little to no experience, above the current minimum wage. I do this so that I can attract enough high-quality employees to operate the farm. The marketplace for labor is driving the real-world minimum wage higher due to limitations in the labor pool for positions such as mine. Boulder County's decision to have an accelerated minimum wage moving to $25 an hour by 2030 is going to have a devastating impact on small businesses and farms throughout the county. I applaud the approach you're taking in the draft legislation. It's a meaningful increase for our lowest wage workers over the next 5 years, but may be reasonable and manageable for small businesses such as mine. I ask you not to make the mistake of moving too far, too fast, like the Boulder County Commissioners, which will severely impact the businesses that make the city of Boulder such a special place. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Now we have Sophia Solano, Isabel Watson, and Hosea Rosenberg.
I do not see Sophia online tonight.
All right, let's go to Isabel Watson then.
Good evening, Mayor Brockett and members of City Council. Thank you for having us today. And my name is Isabel Watson, and I'm here with the Colorado Working Families Party to express our support and ask you to vote yes on the Spear and Folkerts Amendment and increase the minimum wage to $16.58 an hour in 2025 and ending at $19.52 an hour in 2027, with no discrimination because of age. We believe that every hardworking person in Boulder should be able to earn enough money to support themselves and their family. But right now, low-wage workers in Boulder are being left behind. Many of these workers struggle from paycheck to paycheck to make ends meet, often having to make impossible choices, like putting food on the table or purchasing needed medication. This growing income divide hits people of color and low-income communities particularly hard as rent, housing, and basic cost of living in our city continues to skyrocket and working-class wages stagnate. We need to build an economy that respects working people. The gentrification has many residents even struggling to remain in this prospering city that they helped build. We have to do more to make sure working families and small businesses in Boulder have the opportunities and tools they need to build a good life. So please vote yes and raise Boulder's minimum wage starting next year until it reaches $19.52 an hour in 2027, with no exemptions by age. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Hosea Rosenberg, Jorge de Santiago, and Colin Larson.
Hello, this is Hosea Rosenberg. Thank you very much for the time and for allowing me to speak today. I am one of the few restaurant owners testifying today, and as you may guess, I am opposed to this. The reason that I waited so long to speak tonight was because a lot of people do not understand the tipped minimum wage laws that we have to deal with as restaurant operators. We are forced to pay the minimum minus $3 if we choose to take the tip credit for all of our tipped employees. In my restaurants in Boulder, everyone on my staff makes significantly more than the current minimum wage and more than the proposed minimum wage. But that is because of tips, and that is because of a service fee that we apply to our kitchen employees. By raising the minimum wage, I have to raise the tipped minimum, and some of my highest earners, hourly employees who actually make more than many of my managers, some top 40, 50, and even $60 an hour on good, solid rockin' weekend nights, are going to get a raise because of this. And the restaurants, as my restaurants, as many others do, struggle just to find a profit margin. And now I have to give a raise to people who are making significant money as hourly workers. In Denver, there are a lot of articles about this in how this has affected restaurants. And without changing the tip credit laws and the overtime laws for restaurants, it's really hard to stomach paying more for people who are making all of their wages in tips and don't actually need a raise. We bring vibrancy to our community. We bring a lot to our community, and we employ a lot of people in this community. I am 100% for a living wage. I am not for a minimum wage that only affects the top earners in the restaurant business. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we have Jorge de Santiago, Colin Larson, and Charlie Brennan.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jorge de Santiago, and I am the Executive Director of El Centro Amistad, a local nonprofit organization that provides opportunities and programs that promote equity in health, education, and quality of life for the Latino community in Boulder County. I have been living in Boulder since 1988, and I have experienced low wages living and working in Boulder since 1988. And that's why I want to ask Boulder City Council to support the increase of the minimum wage proposal to 15% in 2025, and then after that, 8.5% the following 2 years, and catch up with Denver by 2027. We at Amistad witness our immigrant and BIPOC communities struggle to provide the basic needs to their families due to lower wages. And this, to me, is a wage equity issue. Living in Boulder, a very wealthy community, is unjust that a great percentage of community members are living in poverty and not able to get out of the hole. These workers are the ones that keep Boulder alive, financially speaking, and they deserve the right to a decent living wage. This is why I urge you to support the increase the minimum wage to 50% in 2005, and then 8.5% the following 2 years to catch up to Denver. We at Amistad pay our staff way more than minimum wage, so please, please do not use the nonprofits as excuse to not raise the minimum wage. Boulder needs to walk the talk and bring justice to the workers in the city of Boulder. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Colin Larson, Charlie Brennan, and Peggy Leach.
Yes, hello. Thank you. My name is Colin Larson. I am the Government Affairs Director for the Colorado Restaurant Association here on behalf of the 152 member restaurants within the city of Boulder and the over 7,000 restaurants statewide. First off, I do want to thank you for a very thorough stakeholder process. It truly is the gold standard when you're looking at an issue as complicated and with as much nuance as this, and I applaud you for taking the year to look at that. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the timing of the proposed Volkert-Speer amendment has left it so that many people in the restaurant community have been unable to make it to testify tonight. I've spoken to several restaurateurs who were cut off and not allowed to testify because they did not sign up before 2 o'clock yesterday, which was 23 hours after the amendment was made public. I've also spoken to a number of restaurateurs who cannot make it because they were working at their restaurants. So I would like that to sit in and people think, if they think that the people who showed up in person today is an accurate reflection of the community, I would urge caution drawing conclusions from that. I'm here to speak in mild opposition to the proposed ordinance of an 8% increase per year as originally introduced. I think this is a recognition that this is a compromise measure to take a measured approach to not set Boulder on a path that would not be able to adapt to the economic conditions that we're seeing in Denver right now. And while I do not think that, I think there will definitely be negative consequences for the industry and for Boulder's retail businesses. I do think that the more measured 8% per 3-year growth pattern is something that is livable. I do want to take what limited time I have left to point out that the city of Denver has had dramatic negative consequences. Over the last year, they've lost over 9,000 jobs at a time when the state gained 6,000 jobs and net lost 183 restaurants.
Your time is up, but thank you for your testimony. Now we have Charlie Brennan, Peggy Leach, and Chelsea Castellano.
Good evening, members of the Boulder City Council. My name is Charles Brennan. I'm the Director of Income and Housing Policy for the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, a nonprofit organization that has the vision that every Coloradan should have what they need to succeed. One of the most important ways in which we can achieve this vision is to ensure workers are paid a minimum wage that guarantees a minimum standard of living necessary for their health, efficiency, and general well-being, which was the stated purposes of this policy when Congress passed the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, establishing our country's first minimum wage. By definition, the only time a minimum wage increase will affect employers is if they are paying workers below the new minimum wage. An employer whose lowest paid worker earns $20 per hour or more will not see any negative impact from this proposed increase. They will still be paying their workers above the new wage floor, even into 2027. And when we're talking about the impact on employers, it's important to keep in mind that employers should already be preparing for a minimum wage increase, as the state's minimum wage will increase in January 2025, regardless of your decision here tonight. In that case, the impact or bite of this policy will only affect employers who have workers that are between the state's new minimum wage and the proposed minimum wage for Boulder next year. I want to caution the council as well on basing their decision on this matter on the experience of restaurants in Denver, anecdotal experiences, I'll note. As a Denver resident, I want to stress that there are big differences between Denver and Boulder, including the nature of the challenges facing our restaurants here. As noted in many of the news articles that have been mentioned tonight, looking at this issue, road construction, perceptions of safety and crime in downtown Denver were both factors noted as causes for reduced revenues, in addition to higher food costs and long permitting processes. These are not just issues related to higher labor costs. There are also other strategies that council could consider to assist restaurants in managing the increased labor costs that may result from increasing the minimum wage. I also want to note that the numbers noted by the previous speaker were for the entire metro area of Denver, of which Denver employees account for about 33%. I want to thank you for your time tonight and urge you to increase the minimum wage by 15% next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Peggy Leach, Chelsea Castellano, and Andrew Barton.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Peggy Leach, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. The League is a nonpartisan political organization who has supported living wage for several years now. We really appreciate the council's willingness to raise Boulder's minimum wage effective this January, and ideally to match Boulder County's rate of increase over the next 3 years. Workers, businesses, and residents of Boulder County, including the city of Boulder, can all benefit from a regional approach. It is time to take the first step to close the $8 gap between the current minimum wage of $14.42 and the self-sustainable wage, which is currently over $22 an hour in Boulder County. This gap widens each year, so the longer we don't act, the larger the gap becomes. We urge council to find a workable solution that supports our workers as well as our small businesses. And thinking about the tipped wage credit, perhaps we can work on revising that at the legislature next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final three speakers are Chelsea Castellano, Andrew Barton, and Nina DeSalvo.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chelsea Castellano. I live in Boulder. There is a prevailing wisdom among some that when the minimum wage rises, smaller low-wage employers suffer more from higher labor costs and are more likely to cut jobs. But a groundbreaking study co-authored by Berkeley economist Michael Reich found that small businesses can pass the costs on to consumers with little negative impact. The UC Berkeley study and other studies since have found that higher minimum wages across many states and cities gave employees more financial security without causing their employers to cut jobs. The findings are clear. Higher wages reduce poverty and financial insecurity without sacrificing the health of businesses. And looking more locally at Denver, while economists say that it can be challenging to parse the precise impacts of minimum wage increases from other policies in Denver, the 2023 local minimum wage report published by the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment shows that increases to the minimum wage in Denver lowered unemployment, raised earnings, and benefited the Denver's economy. I urge you to follow the science and not make policies based on fear. I urge you to listen to those who are most vulnerable in our community, as that is not only the right thing to do, but is what you all campaigned on to earn your seat on city council. And here is your chance to put those promises into action. Please support and vote for the Folkerts Amendment to ensure that all people, including young people, have an opportunity to simply make ends meet. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Andrew Barton and Nina DeSalvo.
I do not see Andrew online today.
All right. Our final speaker tonight is Nina DeSalvo. Nina, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Boulder City Council, and thank you so much for your time tonight. My name is Nina DeSalvo, and I'm an attorney and the policy director with Towards Justice, a nonprofit law firm that represents workers in litigation and other advocacy in an effort to advance economic justice. I'm here in support of Boulder's adoption of the proposed local minimum wage ordinance with Council Member Folkert's proposed amendment. Economic data, including data from the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, or CDLE, shows that increasing minimum wages in Denver did not increase unemployment, but did cause wages in the city to go up overall. Boulder can achieve similar results while boosting consumer spending. Denver's minimum wage law took effect in January 2020. The CDLE analyzed the economic effects of that law in its 2023 local minimum wage report, while attempting to control for the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. That analysis included comparisons of unemployment rates and wages in Denver and comparator jurisdictions. The CDLE found that in both 2021 and 2022, as Denver's minimum wage rose significantly, its unemployment rate dropped more than any comparator jurisdictions. The impacts on unemployment were more difficult to analyze in 2020, when COVID-19 hit our country just 2 months into Denver's implementation of its local wage. Nevertheless, the CDLE found that during the first 2 months of the year, Denver's unemployment rate remained lower than comparator jurisdictions. The CDLE also analyzed the impact of Denver's local minimum wage on wages and found that Denver wages rose more than those of all comparator jurisdictions and more than the state, both in early 2020 and again later in 2020 after the main impact of COVID-19. In 2021 and 22, Denver maintained strong wage growth and stronger wage growth than the state as a whole and comparator jurisdictions. Overall, these positive effects on the unemployment rate and wages in Denver are consistent with national evidence indicating that minimum wage increases give the economy a boost because they drive consumer spending and create.
Your time is up, but thank you for your testimony. All right, that's all of our speakers for tonight. I want to give a very hearty thank you to everyone who took time this evening to come out to speak to us on this important matter. Really appreciate all of your time and attention. And I want to give a particular thank you to the translators for your able work in translating in both directions in English and Spanish. That is much appreciated. And I know your work is not quite done. Okay, so it's time for council discussion. Before we get started, I would just like to say, sometimes in our discussions we can be on the informal side. We had some issues with clarity on some of the straw polls in our study session on this. So I'm going to suggest tonight that we go with a motion-based approach where we can make motions and entertain amendments and have our discussion oriented around those and have votes around those. So if council is willing to take that approach, I would recommend it, but we can still have a full discussion. I know in particular we need to talk through the issue of unemancipated minors and of course the final question of what numbers we would be using. So I might invite somebody to perhaps get a motion on the table as a basis for our discussion, but recognizing we can have amendments as well. Ooh, I got both of you here. Do you want to thumb wrestle for it? Flip a coin?
I was just going to start with what's, but whatever.
It's what we have. Lauren, is it all right if? Yeah, as long as I get to make an amendment afterwards. Absolutely. Okay, so Matt, you want to get us started?
Since it's what we have on the table, it's fair to sort of start with that. This is what staff had prepared for. So I'm going to make a motion to introduce an order published by title only, Ordinance 8664, adding a new chapter, 12-6 minimum wage, BRC 1981, setting a local city Boulder minimum wage to be competitive and responsive to current and future needs of its community, and setting forth related details.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on that one. And then Lauren, if you want to jump right in and offer an amendment to frame our discussion as well.
I would like to make an amendment to that motion and propose that for the wage rates that beginning, as in my hotline, beginning January 1st, 2025, that the wage rate would be $16.58 per hour. Beginning 2026, it would be $17.99 per hour, and beginning in January 1st, 2027, matching the city of Denver's 2027 minimum wage rate, assuming that that increase is an increase over Boulder's 2026 wage rate and does not exceed a 15% increase. Additionally, I would like to propose an amendment to strike from the employee or worker definition the words adult or emancipated minor and insert the word individual so that this would apply to all unemancipated minors. Second.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for offering those. So we, like I say, we do need to figure out what to do about unemancipated minors and determine our final numbers. So what I might do is invite our motioner and seconder of the original motion to speak to the motion, and then invite our motion and seconder of the amendment to speak, and then we can invite general discussion after that. So Matt, if you want to get us started.
Yes. So the purpose of this motion was largely to set a balance. We clearly have a need to meet some of those basic needs of workers who are making the very least a minimum wage in our community. There's no question about that. There's no question the needs are going up. But what we also have to balance in that is that there are impacts that raising a wage at a rate that is too steep will have immediate impacts on some of our small business owners who hardly have the margins to make up for that. And in some instances, you've got restaurant owners in particular who save just enough money for when their freezer goes down. Well, this would eliminate all of that saved money for those catastrophic types of events that occur. And so it's incumbent upon us in City Council, I feel, that we have to strike a balance where it's not one group gets all that they want at the cost of another. And so finding a balance on this is it's prudent for us to try to strike that balance. And so I think that is why this sort of 888 proposal is trying to strike that balance early on. It says nothing that in 3 years that a future council could look at this and say, we either need to go up, we need to go down, or we need to stay the course. But I think it's important for us to set it now and get us going in a good direction where we can support our workers while also giving a tenuous lifeline to some of our small businesses to try to make it through. I worry that as some of our smaller businesses, particularly restaurants, are barely got their lips above the water, that if we push it too high, we sort of metaphorically take our foot and push them under. So I think we have to take a balanced approach, and that's why this motion has been made the way it is. Appreciate it.
Thanks for that. And Mark is the seconder.
Past conversations have clearly shown that the entirety of this council supports some increase in the current minimum wage. The issue is the proper increment of increase. It's our job to balance the needs of those on the lowest rung of the economic ladder with the needs of the businesses who actually employ them. I know there are businesses who are unhappy with the 888 formulation. I hope we will pass today, as there are advocates who are unhappy that we're not more aggressive in raising the minimum wage. This tells me this is a compromise worth considering. We cannot restrict our focus only to the betterment of workers without considering the health of the small businesses who make up a substantial portion of our business community. Economic vitality must be more than a slogan or a buzzword. It must be supported by actions that actually promote it. I'm not sure that any member of this council owns and operates a business whose viability depends upon the employment of minimum wage workers. We should therefore be very careful in considering such substantial raises that they can compel these businesses to close their doors, when few, if any of us, have the lived experience to make that judgment. And it is notable that what began as a project to work cooperatively with our sister cities to jointly increase the minimum wage has completely broken down. None of Longmont, Lafayette, Louisville, or Erie is moving forward on this issue. If we're going to go it alone, and clearly we are, we should at least be cautious about the manner in which we do it. All of these factors point to the adoption of a new minimum wage that provides a substantial increase to workers without setting a standard that is likely to require a significant number of employers to cease operations. I believe that Ordinance 8664 does just that, and I urge its adoption by this council. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Lauren, I'll turn to you now as the maker of the amendment motion.
Thank you. 3 years ago, I received strong support when I first asked this council to consider raising the minimum wage. There were 2 requests that council made. On one, that we would make it a regional effort, and the other was to engage extensively with our community. Over the past 3 years, we have formed a coalition with 5 neighboring cities, done a comprehensive economic study, and engaged extensively with our community. While none of the other cities we partnered with in research or engagement look like they will be increasing minimum wage this year, we can join the 2 other existing regional minimum wages. We can match Denver and Boulder County and stand together to support millions of Front Range workers. We can trust our initial vision to create a regional minimum wage that uplifts our community. Today, you've heard a chorus of voices from our community, workers, residents, and business owners. Over the past year, our outreach on this topic has reached over 1,000 community members, more than 400 Boulder residents, and 66% of our community members have supported an increase in the minimum wage. The language and the words might change, but the message is the same. We hear it over and over again. Wages have not kept pace with the cost of living. To Mark's point, I don't believe a single council member up here relies on minimum wage to make ends meet. Our local nonprofits who help fill the gaps between wages and cost of living witness the impacts of our policy decisions on our economically vulnerable community members every day. EFA, Sister Carmen, Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence, All Roads, Boulder Food Rescue, Centro Amistad, Philanthropies, Haven Ridge, CPWD, Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition, Intercambio, and our religious institutions have all called for at least a 15% increase for 2025. These organizations are overwhelmed by the growing demand for their services. They've told us how precarious the economic situation has become for so many of our neighbors. We also hear the concerns of our business owners and acknowledge the economic pressures they face. But we cannot save all businesses, even if we do nothing. Businesses closed last year, and they will close next year, regardless of what we do with minimum wage. Business ownership is itself a privilege and cannot take precedence over the low-wage workers who are the backbone of this community. We've all seen the city's constrained budget and heard about the county funding cuts that are coming. We cannot continue providing life support for businesses that make their workers reliant on government subsidy. I believe in the entrepreneurship and resilience of our business leaders. And for those who are concerned about the increases in unemployment rate that can result from wage increases, as our economic study pointed out, these increases are typically offset by increased labor force you know what I mean, participation, and lead to overall higher employment. I will also point out that people making minimum wage are strongly in support of higher wage increases, higher than we are even currently contemplating. And in relation to the tip credit, you will see the IGA committee bringing forward recommendations in terms of policy that we would like to see changed at the state level. But let's be clear about what happens tonight if our actions fall short. Without a significant increase to minimum wage, workers will be pushed farther from Boulder, increasing traffic, pollution, and inequality. Parents will continue working 80-hour weeks to keep a roof over their heads. Children's health and education will suffer, and families will make heartbreaking choices. We started this process with enthusiasm for a regional effort, for making decisions based on research and data and community engagement. And now, rather than joining Denver or the county, some of us would like to create a third regional minimum wage. Rather than using the research, we are considering an unstudied policy for which we lack projections. Rather than listening to the majority of the community that wanted a faster increase and regional alignment, the ordinance in the packet will slowly raise the minimum wage over the next 3 years, reaching $18.17 in 2027. That is less than Denver's minimum wage is today. 80% or 8% increases every year for 3 years is not a compromise. It's an insult. It's designed to muddy the waters so that you can claim to support a minimum wage increase without taking the meaningful action the community is clearly asking for. If we claim to stand for equity, sustainability, and supporting those who need it most, we need to act. Our minimum wage workers are rightfully owed a 15% increase for the contributions to our community. And the ripple effect will be felt across Boulder, because when we uplift the most vulnerable amongst us, we uplift our entire community. Please join me in voting to raise the minimum wage to match Denver's by 2027, with no exemption for unemancipated minors. Please join me in creating a city where workers and businesses can thrive. Thank you.
Thanks. And Nicole, I'll turn to you as the seconder.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't first say thank you to everyone who shared your stories here tonight, and those of you who are joining us online. Boulder County leader, pastor, and justice advocate Pedro Silva says, relationally speaking, money is a symbol of value. It is not a symbol of worth. This body may put a number on the value of your labor tonight. We cannot put a number on your worth. Your worth is inherent. Tonight is a first step. None of us should have to demand access to basic human rights, such as healthy food, safe housing, culturally competent healthcare, skilled childcare, and more. But the history and present of our country show that we do. Thank you for your dedication to changing the future. To my colleagues, if I get my computer to work. As you know well, I usually try to use data to convince you to get on my side. I'm going to try something a little bit new tonight. We'll see how this goes. I know we're really concerned about some of our businesses going under. As we're hearing tonight, our families and workers are at risk of going under too. In government, only some decisions we make have an immediate impact on people's lives. Most of our votes as a council impact people over decades rather than months or years. The number of people who showed up tonight makes it clear that this decision will have an immediate impact, especially the speakers who've lived here for decades and have never come to talk to us before because there's never been an issue this important to their everyday lives. For our low-wage workers, time isn't just money. It's food, a warm home, and water. And we've received a banquet tonight. I feel its significance too, because the everyday stories I hear from our city's low-wage workers break my heart on a daily basis. And I want to share a few that I've been carrying on my own this past year while we've been working on this issue. The story about the single working mother who had split from her abusive partner and was living in her car with her 10 and 12-year-old children because our strained nonprofits only had enough emergency assistance for 4 nights at a hotel. The story about the older women who also live in their cars because their paychecks aren't enough to cover their bills, who seek safety in numbers as they park together at night. The story about the teen whose low-wage parents couldn't afford a lawyer to help them fight their child's wealthy rapist. These are not just statistics. They are our neighbors' horror stories, and they're unfolding just outside our doors. As council members, we all hold economic privilege. We are all business owners, retirees, or workers who earn well beyond the minimum wage. We are the people who eat at the restaurants where others with less economic privilege can only work. We are more often the friends of the restaurant owners than the friends of the workers. The voices of minimum wage workers and young people are absent from this body. Following other cities and counties in the region for a few years still leaves us with a wage lower than these groups asked us for, as highlighted in the survey that FS sent us, the testimony tonight, and our community engagements. However, meeting other communities in the region in 2027 shows we are mindful of those who do not get a vote in this decision. Compromise is necessary in politics, and it shouldn't feel coercive. The stories we've heard tonight remind us that saying no isn't an option. Voting for an option far less than our community asks for feels more like coercion than compromise, which both the original motion and the amendment are. While matching Denver and the county and Edgewater in 2027 won't solve centuries of labor exploitation, keeping us farther behind while we assess the impacts of an increase will exacerbate our affordability crisis in the coming years. I hope we'll also consider an inclusive approach that includes unemancipated minors rather than exempting them. High school students, too, are part of this narrative. They work not just for pocket money, but to support their families, contributing to necessities like food and electricity. They're investing in their futures when they use their wages to pay for college applications and vocational training, all while shouldering significant responsibilities in their jobs and at school. By excluding unemancipated minors from a minimum wage increase, we inadvertently marginalize a group that already faces systemic challenges and that can't even vote for us yet. Moreover, this exclusion disproportionately affects youth of color as our state's demographics change, and more of our young people identify as people of color, contradicting our commitment to equity and our status as a child-friendly city. Tonight, we have a chance to do something significant that services nonprofits have been begging us for years, an immediate 15% increase. It won't fix everything, but a vote to match the city and county of Denver, Boulder County, and the city of Edgewater, and to include unemancipated minors in this increase. Let us move forward knowing that we are helping low-wage people and the nonprofits who support them with all the tools we can. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so then what I'll do is I'll open the floor if other council members want to address this question before we then go to votes on the amendment and the original motion. So if anyone else would like to speak, I got Tara and then Tina.
I only want to add just a few things. First of all, we're asking the small and the micro businesses to make up for the failure for the state and the county to do what it had to do as far as funds for EFA and other organizations. So are we now asking restaurants and small businesses and child care centers to make up for what they couldn't do? I just don't think it's fair. I mean, that's the first problem I have is like, okay, businesses, small businesses, family businesses, it's up to you again to pull us out because everything that is said tonight is correct. But don't forget who is reducing the funds to EFA by over 30%. It is the county. And we also have the same problem with the state. Did everybody all of a sudden forget that we were going to run out of ARPA funds and they didn't think ahead of time that we were going to have a problem? So why did the businesses, the small businesses, and again, family businesses who basically put their entire life savings into these businesses, they should have to make up for that? I think it's not fair. So that's my first problem with the whole thing. And I didn't write a speech about it, but I'm feeling somewhat impassioned myself. And the other thing I want to say is the 15%, 8.5 didn't go over with our regional partners, the smaller towns. They said no. So I feel like bringing up 888, there is way more of a chance that we're going to get regional buy-in because they basically said no thanks to 15, 8.5, and 8.5. So I say we have a better chance of getting regional buy-in by compromising and asking and still hoping that the other towns will come forth with the increase in minimum wages that is so desperately needed. And those are the two things I want to add.
Thanks. Thanks, Tina.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak a little bit about the unemancipated minors. And I sent a hotline yesterday that talked about whether we can do something to address specifically jobs that are like pre-training jobs. And so these are jobs that are offered usually by the city, and it tends to be things like the junior rangers, and there might be some internships for people under the age of 18. They're very different than other jobs and have a training element. But I did speak with Nuria just before the meeting, and she feels that the cost to maintain those is reasonable. The other piece about unemancipated minors, just something that, and I appreciated what Alejandra Beatty said about let's keep an eye on what happens there, because the report did show a pretty large loss of jobs in the minor category. And while we of course want minors to be paid, they also need to have jobs. And so that was the one area that saw the most dramatic decline. I think it was for the county 900, but as it's been pointed out, it's very difficult to know what the city situation is. So I'm actually fine without any kind of change for the unemancipated minors, but whatever we do, I hope that we're monitoring that on a yearly basis to make sure that our minors are able to have employment opportunities. And also, if you're not aware, some of the jobs offered by the city are already very selective. And my hope is to expand those pre-professional opportunities for minors so that kids who may not feel comfortable yet in a more competitive work environment can have that kind of interaction and get that kind of develop the language and the skills and learn how to use employment systems, which the junior rangers sort of get these amazing opportunities to get those skills, and it's very different than other jobs. So that's what I wanted to add for now.
Thanks. Mark, did you have a clarifying comment on that?
I just wanted to address the unemancipated minor issue.
Sure, and then we'll go to another council member.
Okay. I don't have very strong feelings about it, but I look upon that as opportunity, not discrimination. We want employers to give 17 and 18-year-olds a chance And I don't know that they will give them a chance if they have to pay them the same money that they pay a 25-year-old. If you're running an ice cream shop, it's traditionally been an environment in which kids are employed for that purpose. I want them to have that opportunity to work. If everybody's being paid the same, the proprietor is likely to simply say, I want 3 adults instead of 5 kids. So I think of it as loss of opportunity, not an active discrimination against young people. I want them to have those opportunities. I want them to work, and they're not going to be hired. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I wanted to clarify, Tina, did you want to include or exclude unemancipated minors from the minimum wage?
I keep getting confused with unemancipated and emancipated. I'll be totally honest. I don't want people under 18 to get a different wage.
Okay, so you would like them to be included in the minimum wage, not excluded?
Yes.
Got it.
But
Thanks.
I want to monitor it because they're the most at-risk category for employment, and I think that was very clear in the report we received.
Got it. Thanks. Any other council members want to weigh in? Did you, Taisha?
All right. So I'll go with the easier one for me first, which is I don't want to exclude anybody from whatever we're proposing. Again, although I appreciate the comment that, somebody's using it to pay for field trips, there are too many, unfortunately, that are using it to pay bills. So an hour's wages of work is an hour wages of work. And we know that we are still not being paid on a scale racially for the same amount of work. So although I appreciate the commenter's comment about, more racial and ethnic diversity on the lower wealth scale, I promise you it's not because of minimum wage. It's a variety of accumulating efforts by politicians and business and leaders and others to build wealth for the few on the backs of the many. And that includes our planet. So I just want to honor and to Tina's point, I really appreciate keeping an eye on that. And I do want to honor, what Mark shared around, if I was an employer, paying that wage and I had a 25-year-old and a 17-year-old, right? And so I do want to keep our eye on that and to create those pathways to ensure that, those who are younger have meaningful pathways for work. All right, so that's that one. This other one. So I will start with, as the granddaughter of a business owner, I witnessed firsthand the role that he played, not only in our family and extended family, but also in our community, and not just locally, but state and federally. Oftentimes, business leaders play a significant role in crafting the policies at our local state and government entities, and to know that this increase will disproportionately impact BIPOC-led businesses is very concerning. Especially concerning is that we don't even know how many. There's just some significant data points that are missing from the study that has been provided, making policy decisions challenging without some of that basic data. But I'm also reminded of how the business community, Black business community in particular, helped to pay for John Brown, also helped to pay for the civil rights movement. That wasn't a grant by the Bill and Gates and Melinda Foundation. That was disproportionately impacted communities that had moments of wealth. That's why they burned down Tulsa. That's why they burned down all of those different Black business and towns that were thriving, because they want us in minimum wage jobs. And so again, I'm just very concerned around the disproportionate impact there. And as one of the few Black business owners in the most recent Boulder Economic Summit, and I also had the pleasure and honor of going to the Denver Business Economic Summit as well, and was underwhelmed by the representation of Black, Latino, Latina, Hispanic, Asian, and Asian Pacific Island peoples. And so again, we know that there's going to be disproportionate impacts, and that is certainly top of mind for me. And the main issue with this plan is that it doesn't offer any support for those disproportionately impacted. It was my understanding that Boulder County did have some mechanisms for those businesses that were going to be disproportionately impacted. And I'm hopeful that by having a more steady on ramp that will have opportunities to grow out, first of all, build the revenue necessary, and then make sure that we are in a position to support not just restaurants. And I feel like there was an overrepresentation of restaurants. Again, there's more restaurants that will be impacted because we have more restaurants. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the child care centers as well. And I'm especially concerned that none of the other cities in our county are interested in any kind of increase. And I just say that from a child care perspective because it just is easier to move. And if anything, it might be even closer to where people are commuting in from. And so I have some significant concerns around businesses just moving to other cities in our county. And then the study itself. Another reason why I'm especially concerned about businesses is in this instant, and not over anyone else, but it's because the report did not include climate change. And so we know that there's going to be increased climate change. We know that there's going to be an increase in water and energy specifically, and that was not considered. And I want to commend Taylor and the team. Thank you so much for trying to include that dimension in the original dynamics of the study. But honestly, we cannot have any more studies that do not include some kind of climate analysis. And I just say that because I have concerns about the businesses being able to stay open without any increase next year, based on just what we are seeing and what we are projecting here in the state and around the world and the country. And so, and I'm so glad that we are moving this conversation into a 3-year window and not that 2030. Knowing what we know about where we're at for 2030, we can anticipate more heat waves, famine, and infectious diseases. The conversation that we're having right now doesn't meet the moment, and it doesn't meet our future needs either. It actually is going to make it more difficult for us to gather the resources and support that we needed because we will have such a loss. This is not the time to play small. This is not the time to fight for crumbs. This is the time, and I had something in here about other things, but yeah. It is what it is. I prefer the 888 because it allows us time, it provides us some movement, as none has been done over the last 3 years, but it also allows us time to better assess who exactly will be impacted out of the 400 and so restaurants, 20 or so childcare businesses, and we don't even know some of the other numbers and metrics around micro businesses. Like, we don't even know how many we have. I support the 3 years because it allows us to have time to look back on the analysis, but I especially appreciate the annual updates and a data analysis that allows us to be able to potentially make bigger moves as we have more information. I'm also very eager to work across the local, state, and federal continuum, going back to we cannot work alone. I'm excited to hear that the intergovernmental affairs or policy priority team is already considering supporting legislation and ballot measures at the state level to address this inconsistency with tip workers. I'm also hopeful that we can do some more work in that area. Federally, did we forget about universal health care? When did that conversation go away? Because when I look at books of our businesses, and I've looked at books of businesses, and I see the cost of healthcare and benefits, that is a significant cost. So going back to, we cannot do this alone. We are going to see increased billion-dollar disasters. That's another piece that wasn't included in this analysis. And some would say, well, that's a case to increase the minimum wage. No, that's the case for a living wage. That's what that case is for. That's a case for basic income. That's what that's a case for. And so again, my ancestors did not have to buy back their children so that we can just create more crumbs along the line. Please, I'm asking us to work more collaboratively, and not just regionally. This is literally a federal, state, and local issue. And again, you can feel however you can feel about the Koch brothers, but one thing that they were excellent at was understanding the continuum between federal, state, and local. And I'm just hopeful that very quickly we can make the moves that we can make. So moving forward, I'm excited to support the 888. I'm excited to work with the Economic Vitality team to identify the programs and determine the changes that are needed. I'm excited to deepen partnerships with the Latino Chamber, the other entities, our nonprofits, our Small Business Development Center, and many, many others. And again, I'm not opposed to revisiting the regional approach, but I need the region to step up, and we can't just be the only ones with the most to lose. And I just say that because I've already lost 60% of my friend groups to all of those because they have been priced out. And this increase would not have saved them from having to move, and would not allow them to buy houses, would not allow them to do the things that we want them to do. And so I ran on a just and joyous, and honestly, I don't think that this is the justice that we deserve, the justice that we need. And I'm hopeful that in the efforts moving forward, as I said, the gold standard is not Denver either. They're not moving to a living wage. So why am I tagging myself to a losing strategy? I'm just asking us to have the audacity to believe that we are worthy of something greater than crumbs. I'm asking us to do that. And yes, I know people would be disproportionately impacted. I'm not done with our budget. And I hope that you aren't either. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, did you want to? And then I'll call on myself last, then we'll move to a vote.
We have the best chance of having a strong and resilient economy when we have a predictable and orderly environment for businesses to make investments and to make commitments to hiring employees. And also when households have the resources that they need to take care of their families, and they have the financial buffers for when shocks hit, shocks that could be unique to them, but also to our wider community that include fires, other climate disasters, and otherwise. It's not fair for small business owners to have to pay to try and solve society's problems when they operate with deliberate formulas and in a delicate balance that they set out for. But it's also not fair that our community has been left in a place where the basic daily costs are outstripping full-time and even beyond full-time workers to make ends meet, and where those near the edge are lacking basic health care and crucial services. And it's costly for small businesses to have to pay for this. I grew up in a small family retail business that my parents started, in which they have paid minimum wage workers. They've done so for the last 50 plus years now. And I remember literal kitchen table discussions when the possibility of minimum wage increases was something that my parents worried about. And I knew it would impact our family. And so I know that about $2 an hour raise for a full-time employee over the year is about $4,000 per employee per year before taxes. And I know this will impact small businesses. It will probably impact some considering their ability to exist, and it will impact nonprofits being able to do some kind of work. But it's also costly that we say you can work here, but you don't have an expectation of being able to live here. And it's costly that we don't accommodate people from all generations and in all backgrounds to be able to afford to live in Boulder. And it's costly for our residents to reap the effects of poverty, including homelessness, insecurity, and other dysfunction that comes around it. So this is not straightforward. This is a policy decision that is disruptive to important parts of the community, no matter what we do here. So I will look to our best analysis that we've been given from the experts. Analysis that I have read says the right thing for the community to do on net system-wide is to do the increase, to do, I guess the Folkerts Amendment is our term tonight, is the best that we have. I think we should also pay special attention to the social workers and the nonprofits who are working with our most vulnerable community members. And they are telling us to move towards the Denver level, and to align with Boulder County. So I think that's what we should do. And the unemancipated minors, I would agree with. I forgot the logic of it, but they should have the same wage. And not the logic, but the definition of it. And just a couple things before I close. I know many of the voices here who are asking us not to go forward with an increase are providing a variety of crucial services for our community, some that are directly about supporting people who need the most help. And I hope when we go forward, we'll be able to develop policies and strategies to help them here locally, to help them with the state and beyond. And also, the poverty, inequality, and despair that is facing a lot of this issue is rising. And it's not just rising here, but in other cities as urbanization continues to build and housing continues to be insufficient. And it's not something we're going to stop tonight. So I hope that I'd like to join my Councilmember Adams in a bigger push for more systemic solutions that are much more long-term oriented after we proceed from tonight, that include giving more people the right to be able to live near where they work, to move around at a reasonable expense, that we look for more options for cooperative ownership that creates more wealth for people, and more. So that's it, but I want to say I admire and thank Councilmember Folkerts for her leadership over the last couple of years with this, and also Taylor and other staff who've put in such incredible work into this.
All right, I'll call on myself. Go last here. I'll be quick. I know it's getting late. This question before us of the raising the minimum wage and by how much is a question of trade-offs. There are benefits and there are some potential negative impacts. I do support the larger 15% increase in the first year, and I'll just highlight a couple of reasons. The primary of which is that this would get more money into the pockets of the people who are struggling most in our community. So the people who are really struggling to get by, and I found some of the testimony this evening about people who've had to work multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table to be compelling. So I would like to lean on the side of getting more money to those who are working hard and struggling to get by. And then I'll just also note that it's taken us quite a while to get to this point. We were first granted the ability to raise the minimum wage in 2019, backed off during COVID. There was a possibility we would do it last year, but we decided to wait until we got the full economic analysis. Add my very big kudos and thanks to Taylor for the incredibly hard work over the last year. Did a really thorough outreach to all members of our community, which I really appreciated, a thorough study. But I feel like it's taken long enough that starting off more quickly, given how long it's taken us to get here, is reasonable. So I will be supporting that 15% increase in the first year. And then just to the question of the unemancipated minors, I would not exclude them. I would pay them the same rate. And just a couple things there that definitely there are some young people whose wages contribute to their families being able to get by. And so want to make sure that they get the help that they get a fair wage for the work that they're doing to support their family. And I also want to call out, we got an email earlier today from Lindsay Loberg, who pointed out something that I appreciated, which is that it's actually not a simple process to emancipate yourself as a minor. So there may well be young folks who are estranged from their family working to get by just by themselves, but who are technically still unemancipated. So there are those folks that I think are struggling who deserve to get that full wage. And I will leave it there. Do we have maybe quick final follow-ups before we go to a vote? Real quick, Nicole.
Yeah, I just wanted to get for the record a couple of things that folks said and offer some data. Can't be without that. And Tara, I just wanted to say I absolutely love that you support government-funded healthcare, childcare, and housing. That was awesome to hear. So thank you. First of all, this comment about having people choosing to hire older youth rather than younger youth. I just want to remind everybody about this demographic shift that is coming that I talk about a lot. We will have fewer workers in the coming years, and our businesses will not really get to choose if they're hiring 25-year-olds or 17-year-olds. So I think that this point is really relevant for setting us up for the future. Also, the region is bigger than the county. Already, there are a lot of young people moving to Denver because of higher wages. And one of the business owners who talked about closing a business here actually reopened a business in Denver because that's where he could find workers. And our revenue depends on sales tax. Low-income workers spend more of their money on goods and services than high-income people. So some of the businesses should see that they have more customers as we consider this wage increase.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, so I'd like to go to votes if we could, just so I want to be very clear about what we have on the table. We have an initial motion put forward by Matt that moves the ordinance as written in our packet, which, to be clear, is 3 years of 8% increases and which also excludes unemancipated minors. And then we had an amendment motion by Lauren that edited that to change it to a 15% in the first year, 8.5% in years 2 and 3, and also to include unemancipated minors in the wage. Now, from the comments, it sounds like there may be maybe a majority who want an 8%, but who also want to include emancipated minors. I'll note that if this amendment fails, someone could offer a second amendment that just focused on the unemancipated minor question. How so? Yeah, so Lauren's amendment includes adding unemancipated minors that they will get the wage, and it also includes a 15%, 8.5%. So it's both of them tied together. But if that vote fails, somebody could make a motion just about unemancipated minors.
Can I clarify? It's basically a new ordinance.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
Want to clarify on the Folkerts amendment?
Mm-hmm.
The third year would be a direct match to Denver, which would constitute an 11.1 rather than an 8.5%.
Lauren?
So that depends entirely on what inflation looks like. If you look at the 10-year inflation average between 2010 and 2020, that is 2.5%. If you look at the most recent inflation rate for the past 10 years, excluding our exceptional years of 8% and 5%, we are looking at 2.7. So, they were coming out of COVID was fairly unusual in terms of our inflation rate. All I'm saying is that we don't really know what that percentage will be, which is why I put the not to exceed the state cap. But it is likely between, 8 and, 11%, sure.
So council member, would it be accurate to say that it's variable and that it would be inaccurate to assign a particular number to it tonight?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, so our first vote is going to be on the so-called Folkerts Amendment. You're famous, Lauren. And so...
Point of order.
Yes.
Do you need to change your amendment? No, okay.
But just as a note, if it is voted down, another amendment motion could be offered. So would we do a roll call for this, Elisha? We don't do that many amendments.
You can do a show of hands for the amendment, and then the final disposition of the ordinance, then we can do the roll call.
Sounds good. All right, so we have a motion by Lauren, seconded by Nicole. All in favor of that amendment, raise your hand. All right, so that's 4 votes in favor of that. So that amendment motion is unsuccessful. Does anyone want to consider a different amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to amend the original motion to include unemancipated minors in the minimum wage.
So you move to amend
the original
motion
the original motion
to include unemancipated
Correct.
minors. Okay, do we have a second for that? Lauren, did you have is that a second or a question?
Second.
Second, okay. We've got a motion, a second. I don't know that we need to do more debate on this. So all in favor of Tina's amendment to include unemancipated minors in the minimum wage, raise your hand. And we actually got 8 for that one. So that passes. Okay, so that brings us back to Matt's original motion, seconded by Mark, of the original ordinance with the 888 increases, but as amended to include unemancipated minors. And for this, I'll turn to Alicia for a roll call.
All right, thank you, sir. We'll start the roll call on ordinance 8664 as amended with Mayor Pro Tem Spear.
Yes, with a lot of heartbreak.
Councilmember Wallach.
Aye.
Weiner.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
And Shuhart.
Yes.
Ordinance 8664 is hereby introduced, amended, and approved unanimously.
All right. Well, Council, thanks so much for that discussion and for getting through that process. It's been a long time getting here. Thanks to all of our community members for coming out and weighing in on this question. Really appreciate all of your input. And again, a huge thank you to our staff team, Pam, Taylor, and all the rest for all this work that very hard work that you've done to get us to this point. Really appreciate it. We are not done.
The Northern Lights are happening right now.
And we're
Do go outside and see the Northern Lights. They're rocking right now.
Okay, so time for a time check. We got one last agenda item, which is Lauren's update on the regional homelessness effort. Are folks good with tackling that before we go home? Is that right? Okay, but I'll maybe encourage us to try to be focused because I know I'm exhausted after all that, and I imagine we're all a little tired. But do you want to read that into the record, Alicia?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next on tonight's agenda is item number 4, matters from the mayor and members of council. 4A is the Regional Working Group on Homelessness Goals update and discussion.
And we'll turn to Lauren, who's
So,
spearheading this.
as you all know, Boulder County has stood up a regional homelessness working group for which I represent us. Thus far, we have been determining what direction this group is going to take going forward. And we have defined our why statement for the group as our work on homelessness is about helping real people through compassion, support systems, and social justice. And then we have 3 proposed areas of focus that begin to lay out how we will approach this work. And those areas are advocacy at the local, state, and federal level, support the creation of affordable housing to address homelessness, and provide supportive services to improve housing stability and decrease returns to homelessness. This is also all in a hotline I sent out if you would like to read along. So there are 4 questions that I have for our council tonight. Hopefully we can be quick with some of these. My first question is, with these goals in mind, do you support the direction of the working group is going, and should we continue participating in this regional group? Sort of a threshold question, which I'm hoping is an easy one for us to answer.
Does anyone want to advocate for pulling out?
Yeah, I mean, and could you just recommend whether we should pull out? Perhaps you.
Sure, I will recommend that we continue.
Okay.
Down this path.
I think we should continue.
Right. So seeing no objections, I'll take that as a yes. Are there any modifications you would like to see made to either the how or the why statements that are being proposed by the working group? And I don't have any particular ones. I will say that Kurt really would like, our Director of Housing and Human Services, would really like to see PSH incorporated in what we're doing in this group, but I think that perhaps that is an action item, and it seems like these areas of focus leave room for us to advocate for that with our more specificity.
I appreciate you doing this and doing this work and leading the way here, representing us. In terms of modifications, I think one thing that seems to be missing to me here is clarity around this group helping define how we actually raise the revenue to achieve any of this work. We had a behavioral health study and plan that laid out nearly $100 million worth of programs and services, but no mechanism from which to fund any of it. And I'm worried that we'll sit here and have a plan that sits on a shelf, collects dust if it doesn't have a real means to actually achieve any of it. So I'd really like this group, because it has county and all these cities get behind what are the revenue sources to do this, and not just look to the state or feds. We're going to have to do some of this on our own, and everyone's going to have to get skin in the game. So I'd love for that to be a major charge for this group.
Can I suggest something real quick? It's our next step is to add action steps to each of these focus areas. So perhaps under the advocacy at local, state, and federal level, creating a funding source for us to do our work would be one of the action areas we would like to propose.
That sounds great. And I just have to ask, who's going to keep track of what action items we're interested in?
I can try and take notes, but I wouldn't mind if there was someone supporting me in that. Megs. Yes.
All right, Megs has got it as well. Thank you, Megs.
Thank you.
I have a question, Lauren. Yeah. I momentarily stopped listening at a very important part where I should have been listening. So do you mind explaining, are they going to do PSH? Are they going to discuss it? Or do you need us to say, yes, please?
So this is getting a little ahead in our questions, but my final question has to do with action steps for each focus area. And so I think figuring out how we could maybe fit PSH as one of those action steps might be something that I could see this council supporting.
Definitely.
Sorry, I'm feeling weird because I see people raising their hands.
Are we on number 3?
We jumped
Are
ahead.
we on 2 or 3?
We're kind of skipping to 4.
Well, I was just going to say on 3, when we talk about adding definitions, and because one of the third goal is supportive services, that is sometimes similar to PSH. So I would perhaps suggest that we define supportive services as inclusive of PSH, or if cousin or something.
I think that is a great recommendation. Thank you.
Nicole, did you have one?
I did. I was curious if you could tell me why the why statement says real people versus just people.
Writing why statements is not one of my personal strengths, and I cannot say that I contributed heavily to this portion of the working group's work. That was what was recommended or agreed to by the group.
Okay, thank you. I might just ask for that modification to take out the qualifier of real. Thank you.
So you're saying you want to help fake people, Nicole? That's a great point. Or maybe pick a different adjective, but get rid of real. Goodness.
So just point of clarification more so around the provide supportive services. So one of the conversations that we had at the joint meeting was just the need for more mental health, addiction and recovery, and physical. So is that what's underneath the supportive services?
That term is not clearly defined here. Would you like to recommend that we include that in the definition of that?
Yes.
Will you say that again so that I can?
Well, just calling out specifically the need for mental and physical health recovery and addiction and transitional living are 3 areas. Sorry, while I have a hot mic, I'm also going to just lift up workforce. Because some folks, in the supportive services, workforce support or training, identification,
Thank you. Any other definitions or things that we want to include in the definition, please?
Yeah, this is around the just thinking about how we're defining affordable housing. When I think about our housing need, it's a range of prices that we would probably consider affordable, and just having some clarity around that. And then also that affordable housing that meets people's housing type needs. So if people need accessible housing, we have affordable accessible housing. And so I don't know if there's a way of defining that with a few more words, like support the creation of affordable housing at a range of prices that meets people's diverse housing type needs. Something like that could work. I just want to make sure that we're lifting up the accessibility and that, a single person doesn't necessarily need a 4,000 square foot 5-bedroom home.
Point of clarification or qualiqua. For that, does that include like the permanently supportive housing or the Bluebird one?
Bluebird would be a PSH facility.
Oh, sorry. That's already in there.
Yeah, which is sort of, but I think, including permanent affordability in that definition of affordable would be good.
Did you have another one, Nicole? That was it? Okay. So Lauren, where are we in your questions?
So now we get to the fourth one, the really fun one, action items for each focus area. We have been asked as representatives of the municipalities to share the 2 or 3 specific actions our council would support in these focus areas. These actions are actions the working group would take, and since the working group has currently no direct funding and is not empowered with decision-making authority, these are likely somewhat limited in scope.
They're likely what?
Somewhat limited in scope.
And we already have pursue, or can you read what we already have from our?
So for advocacy at the state and local, state, and federal level, Matt recommended funding mechanism to come together and determine a funding mechanism as an action item to support this work.
Wasn't there something about PSH as well?
I think so. Tina recommended rolling that into our definitions, and I think that is a better place for that to live.
Great.
So if there are any other recommendations for advocacy at the local, state, or federal level in terms of action items, other communities will also have some, so we don't need to have 3, but.
I don't know if it's possible to, and there are probably people who already understand this landscape pretty well, but to create some kind of inventory or map with the services and housing options that are in development or being provided currently, and to try to specify the gaps in a funding perspective so that when we do that advocacy, we can be clear rather than just approaching with a general amount, but instead just being a little bit more specific about what it is, where are we falling short, and where we think the likely people are who can provide that kind of funding, or if that's not possible, how we're going to generate that kind of revenue.
I just want to bring forth Councilmember Adams' suggestion again for mental health and drug addiction and also transitional housing. Do you think that needs to be separate?
Could it be something specific under provide supportive services? Specific
Because
I was
item
thinking
on
that that was another one that was part of the definition of the kinds of physical supportive services we're looking to provide, but it could also be an action item.
I'm concerned that the county, that it's not going to happen, and I think it's one of the most important things that needs to happen of all things, because we can't fix some of our problems without it. So I don't know how we put exclamation points after it, but that's what I would like to do.
Can I call it quick on that? On mental health and behavioral health in particular, I would again like us to understand what is being offered and where is it that we do know that those services are being offered in our community, but we also hear that it's not enough. If we could try to understand what that delta is, I think it would be helpful, because if we choose to do something as a city, ultimately we'll have a good idea of what we need to do financially.
And maybe if I can piggyback on that, because I think that's a great point, but because I don't know of a countywide inventory of funding and services that are offered. Like, I have a decent sense of what we have in the city, but
Yeah, so I'm thinking that maybe that's an action item under both the creation of affordable housing and the supportive services, that kind of roadmap piece is something that we would want to see as a first step for both of those items.
yeah, an inventory.
Yeah, sorry, an
yeah.
inventory. Yes.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. I thought that we were getting that already from the homelessness study. I thought, am I making that? Okay, you're all giving me the face, so probably, am I confusing a study? Is a different study coming?
No, there's a HSBC based homelessness studies coming out.
And it was my understanding that it was supposed to tell us, like, here are the services that are being provided, and
Supposed to and will are two different things.
on like what you said there. But I mean, yes, I mean, and so to update what already exists. But I just wanted to, I was like, wait, is there not? I thought that's what we were waiting for in December. So okay, I'm fine with that. As far as the advocacy, I just am hopeful that we can also include health care and not just looking at things that are specific to housing, but recognizing that health and healthcare and universal healthcare specifically would have a substantial increase impact on decreasing the likelihood of people falling out, but then also being able to stay housed. Thank you.
Yep. Ryan, did you?
Lauren, your suggestion that we should be just don't expect too much in number 4 on the detail for just resource reasons makes me think, I guess maybe a couple things. One, my interest in this initiative overall is, or I guess what I think the opportunity is for us is to have a shared approach with other entities in the county that is focused on outcomes and is based on a shared change model or a shared idea about what it will take to achieve outcomes. And so if we won't adjudicate this in the detail of number 4, I guess it does, I'm sorry, but it sort of takes me back to maybe the couple of the other higher level points like the why. So for example, the why statement, I am now looking at this and thinking I would rather this have an outcome, express an outcome in it. It says our work is about helping people. It feels a little meta to me. I would like to know ideally what it will do. So like we will resolve homelessness, or let's define what resolving homelessness to us means, or to some level. It's so that we can empower the folks that are closer to this to do it. But let's be clear that we have an objective, which is to, I think it's described in probably a verb with a with nouns or a noun around it. And then I guess secondly, on the next three bullets, and I'm sorry if I'm relitigating what we just talked about, but it seems to presuppose a change model. And so I guess I'm just thinking, like, to me, the power of the opportunity of this group is to come together and to establish what do we collectively think needs to be done to achieve the outcome. So I don't know I don't know I guess what the answer is then to the definitions, but I'll just end by saying I would like to, if I could, and I'm sorry to do this, I would like to say on the why statement that we use the words, our work on homelessness is to resolve homelessness, or some synonyms, or I guess ways to explain that's about the outcome.
Yep, this is under the advocacy section. One is to think about advocating for subsidies and emergency assistance funds to help now. We can't build affordable housing quickly enough to help everybody who's currently experiencing homelessness, or all those who are on the verge of falling into homelessness while we're having these conversations. So I would just advocate for that, some more immediate assistance. And then also funding for, this is with my Dr. Cog hat too, but Dr. Cog's going to be doing a study on strategies of how we actually get to meeting our affordable housing needs, and funding for those strategies to be implemented specifically in Boulder County would be great. Obviously, that would be for the 2026 legislative session, because those strategies won't be available to next summer. And then the other question that I have is around, we've got this regional Built for Zero program. What do we need? What is getting in the way at the state level? And how can we think about advocating for more of that program, or more reducing some of the barriers that are in the way of our actually arriving at zero functional homelessness?
Yeah, so since I threw out the funding one, but that was an earlier piece, so that moved to actions, which I appreciate the feedback. In terms of bullet 2 and supporting the creation of affordable housing, this is intrinsically connected to the 1B funding the county passed, I think. So I'd like to see us be really clear that we would like to see the 1B funding be allocated as the municipalities have asked, which is directing the funds directly to the cities. So we know how to operate that, and then we can work with BHP to execute that appropriately. So I want to make sure that's done clearly. And then with regards to providing supported services, I think we were not fortunate enough to see our congressional spending requests get met, and so we are still holding on to a high utilizer program that we desperately need to fund. And I think it would be great to see this group lean into a high utilizer program, because we have it defined. It's got tons of stakeholder engagement, and it's one of the more well cooked and well deliberately thought out things that we've got in this whole suite of possible programs and services. So it would be really nice to see that as a clear action for support services for housing stability and decreased returns to homelessness.
Just whatever thoughts you have, I would say at this point. I think
All
we're
right,
in
sorry,
the
I've been trying to follow.
action items on whatever you like.
Okay, I've been trying to follow a little bit of structure, but on the providing supportive services, I'm just wondering if we could also think about financial literacy as being something there, career development and training, those kinds of things, because there are so many people in homelessness who really, with some of those skills, that would help increase their or decrease their returns to homelessness.
Yeah, Lauren.
And just to, again, as it was explained to me, the things that we can do in terms of action items are more like, what is this working group actually going to do? Like, do you want us to show up to all write a letter collectively? Or, I think that there is an interest in trying to really narrow down because we can't work on a lot of things. And and again, we don't have a funding mechanism to actually create any programs. So it's more about how do we work within this space to get alignment or agreement between the different municipalities on something. I see Nuria popping.
If I may, and I know I'm jumping in here as you all are talking, but one of the things that strikes me in this conversation, if I can be so bold as to intrude, is as you're having the conversation about regional efforts, and this comes from the conversation you had originally, my humble suggestion to you all is to think about how do you really push the envelope on regionalists, right? Because if not, we're thinking really about our city, and that invites more in our city. The perhaps suggestion that I take from, and I haven't talked to Kurt about it, but the suggestion that came out in our first original conversation about how do we invite our sister cities to have more PSH in their communities would frankly alleviate the burden of PSH in our community. And every community should have permanent supportive housing in their community. Every community should have a shelter space. Every community should have a Sister Carmen in their space. How do we continue to provide those services in every single community so it is not just in our case, Longmont and Boulder as a shelter? Where can we support our other communities and having those needs as well? So my perhaps my suggestion is, as you're thinking about regional needs, to think about those kind of conversations as well.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Nuria, is extremely well said. Because I do feel like we're flailing a little bit, like about how do we solve homelessness with this body, and it's not empowered to kind of do that. So, but the push for regionalism, because I was going to make a comment about how this group could make specific recommendations for action items that could then be brought back to councils, the various councils, to request action on them. It'd be an example of, and also just how we make sure that there are services everywhere. And then I'm going to call on Taisha, but I wonder if we might try to come to a close here, because I think too many specifics aren't probably going to solve our problem here tonight.
No, I understand, and what I'm sharing, it hasn't been shared yet. As an activity, I really appreciated the housing summit that we had, and I'm just, as an activity, would appreciate some type of, although, I mean, we could make updates on that, but just the idea of us all coming together is just really powerful, and to have some conversations, to do some visioning. Obviously we have the Boulder Valley Comp Plan update, so obviously there's some synergies already happening at the city and county level, and in lieu of having another meeting, it would be wonderful when that topic comes up if we could identify some synergies across the planning that's already happening for the Valley Comp Plan update, but recognizing that some of the other cities aren't a part of that, but it's the same region. So just wanted to lift that up as a specific opportunity and an alignment. Thank you.
Lauren, do you think you can work with what you've gotten so far?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much. Is there anything you think we should clarify, Megs, before we? Yeah.
Great.
Sorry, I feel.
I would just like to clarify that ultimately staff will be prioritizing some of these from our staff. So, I think it's important to make sure our staff is a strong voice in this process as well. So, and I appreciate that you're working as a advocacy group and for understanding, but for implementation, I would hope it's our staff.
Yeah, I wonder if everyone would agree with sort of me and Meg's drafting up what we think these responses are, and also getting feedback from HHS on their recommendations or what we might focus on for best oomph.
That's great. I saw Meg's nodding enthusiastically, which is impressive given the hour that we're at right now. So thanks for volunteering to do that. So that sounds like a good next step on that. Excellent. Well, so Lauren, thank you so much for your work on this and moving this forward. And then I was remiss because I didn't call you out in the minimum wage. Thanks as well, because you, of course, on the consortium have worked as our representative on the regional efforts for going on 2+ years now. And so we're all in your debt for working on that regional approach.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Oh, Ryan?
Just kind of to build on that, I just wanted to do appreciation for Lauren. You've spent years on the the minimum wage item. You're now just rolled straight into the homelessness regional discussion. These are two of the mega issues that we're all just struggling with, and you do this with such leadership and poise, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
It's like Folkert's night over here. All right. All right, seeing nothing else, I'll go ahead and gavel is closed here at 9:48 p.m. Thanks everybody for a productive meeting and have a great night. And I hear the lights are visible, so go out, look to the northern sky.